You're live.
Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Poikinen. I am here in yet still half burnout Boulder Creek, California. Um, wow, y'all, buckle up. This is gonna be phenomenal. And probably a little weird. Because why wouldn't it be? Slow News Day. You guys know where you're at. You do. Uh, my name is Steve Poikinen. I am joined by my incredible co-host Glory Jones. What's happening, Glory?
Today is gonna be fun.
We have two special guest co-hosts joining me from Pasadena, California via Orlando, Florida, Miami, Florida. One
Boca Raton.
Costa Jardula.
Not Miami.
Oh, that's
There's
right.
a
You're all up,
difference
you're all
between
bougie
Miami and Boca
right
Raton.
now.
Let's clear that up. There's a difference between Miami and Boca Raton.
No, you're absolutely right. It's usually like several $100,000 and a nice sweater. Yeah, but Craig Pasta Jardula from the Convo Couch joining us from Boca Raton, Florida, and from who the fuck knows where. Your Mark Lubers, joining us from cyberspace, as we welcome for what may be a final interview. The one and only Commander X. How are you doing, my friend? It is very good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'd like to just start by thanking everybody who's tuning in today, and just say really quick that we're living in terrible times, in some of the worst times I've ever seen. So I want you all to know, everybody who's listening, everybody who might see this on the archive, my heart is with you. I am almost 60 years old. I've never seen times like this. So be safe. Stay as close as you can to those you love and trust. And prepare, I think, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. But stay safe and know that my heart is always with you, even if I can't be with you like the old days. So I want to give some shout outs if I can be indulged real quick. I'd love to say hello to all of the Friends of X Committee, who are some group of activists here in Mexico who have taken my care and my wonderful boys, my dogs' care into made it their responsibility, essentially, and they take it very seriously. Especially like to give a shout out to Natalia Rivera Scott,
Yes.
We love you, Nat.
who is the head of the committee, but also love to give a shout out to Stephanie Valerio, who's also a member of the Friends of X committee, and it is her birthday today. So happy birthday, Stephanie. Much love. I would like to give one last shout out to my best friend in the whole world, who is up in Toronto right now. To him and his family, especially his lovely children. Ian Thornton. He is also my media agent, and he has. I'm going to give a shameless plug. He has a new book out. It is gone to rave reviews. I think it might even be shortlisted on a couple of bestseller lists. The reviews are just amazing for this book. It's quite a thick book. It's entitled "The Deaths and Afterlife of Aleister Crowley," and if you this is not necessarily a book about the occult sort of aspects of Aleister's life. It is much more delves into the political intrigue that he was involved in for much of his life. And it has quite, I don't want to give any spoilers. It has quite a few surprises in it for people who think they know everything about this man. Let me just drop one little hint. He had more in common with Antifa than you might have ever guessed. So I recommend it. Give it a read. It's available in all the major bookstores, online, that sort of thing. The Deaths and Afterlife of Aleister Crowley. Give it a read. It's a fantastic book and a huge revelation. If you think you know a lot about this man, you might have some surprises coming. So there you go. That's my plugs.
Fascinating. And I will underscore the shout outs and thank yous to Nat and Stephanie, that both of those ladies have been just incredibly supportive and wonderful, and far too easy on the eyes.
Well, I would not have survived the amount of time I did, since I sort of, as Mark put it, sort of dropped off the face of the earth almost a year ago.
Yeah, fucker. By the way,
I would not have survived this amount of time had it not been for their intervention. So, and it was not my request to them. Natalia traveled from Mexico City to where I was living at the time in Guanajuato, and pounded on my door, demanded admittance, and made it clear that she was going to intervene. And without that intervention, I'm quite certain you would not be having this interview opportunity right now.
well, there were a couple of us that were figuring out how to sneak me across the fucking border, because I was ready to fucking chase your ass down too. Like, my passport's being held right now, so I can't freely travel. Which I don't, I mean, well, if I'm landlocked, I'm landlocked. It just sucks to have clipped wings. X, this is the floor is basically yours at this point. Now, we have Mark Lubers and we have Pasta here, because there's a handful of things in a couple of your books that deal with years ago what we're seeing right now. And right now, at least the state of America is just, I don't know if we've been this embroiled in like false flag chaos since 9/11. Like, I really don't. And nobody knows, nobody knows, like, well, which way's fucking up right now, especially where our elections are concerned. And the opening chapter of your book, Dark Ops, you talk about,
everyone should read because it's fucking amazing.
You talk about an Anon op, or a PLF op under the anonymous flag, called Op Vendetta. And I was hoping that you and Pasta could kind of get into a talk about that, and sort of segue or use that to sort of highlight where we are right now with our elections, and this sort of ridiculous position that a lot of the people on the quote unquote left have, that for some reason the general election that we just went through was the freest and fairest election in the history of elections ever on the face of God's green earth.
Yeah, that sounds legit. Yeah.
That somehow a privately owned election is 100% legitimate.
So I don't know if Craigie Pasta has a couple of questions he wants to lead off with, or
Sure,
if you want
I can
to
lead off with
give
it.
an overview on Ob Vendetta, or Lubers, if you have anything to add to that. Like, let's just kind of, let's get into what happened in 2012 so that we can try to understand what happened a couple of months ago.
I think that what I'm trying to do too as well, and coming into this interview today, I know when I talk to Steve and Gloria and the Action for Assange people, they're very nuanced, and they already know a lot of stuff that the general public doesn't know. We both have channels. I deal a lot with election integrity. He deals with, these guys deal with Action for Assange, and it's not the most sexy topics. I mean, we get a lot more clicks talking about what AOC tweeted and what's going on with electoral politics. So it's really hard to get people involved. So just recently, X, what I am doing is I'm getting away from the last election, the 2020 general election, whereas I was constantly pointing out areas of concern, not only with just the way ballot harvesting could be bad, and when you have extra ballots out there and how they can be stuffed and clustered, but I've always been, since 2016, talking about the software. And unlike Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, I'm not trying to blame Hugo Chavez. What I always say is that proprietary software in public funding elections is the worst thing that could happen. But what I think is people don't understand who's doing the flipping. They're now pointing the finger at Dominion, going, "Oh, Dominion did the flipping. Dominion did the flipping." Can you explain to the audience how not only Dominion or ES&S or Smartmatic and all the companies that own 99% of the tabulation machines that count our elections, who in actuality is doing the flipping? Because you told me a story about what happened in 2014?
2012.
That I think was 2012. That I think was amazing. So can you actually give a little explanation about the software and who's actually doing the flipping? Is it a third party that's doing the flipping, or are these Dominions inside Dominion doing the flipping?
Well, I think I would start answering that question by a caveat. I really am only familiar with the hacking that went on in one election, and that was in 2012, where I can speak to it authoritatively and say that back then, the very concept, the very idea of hacking an election was brand shiny new. And there were, and I'm quite certain of this, and I stated in my book, there were only two parties involved in hacking the 2012 election. However, I'm an informed observer, and I think more informed than the average person, having actually probably one of the only people, I think the only person willing to speak publicly about the fact that I actually was part of hacking an election. And so that definitely informs my opinion, informs my observations. And I think
It's okay.
now I definitely do not want to say an opinion, state an opinion.
Oh no.
See?
He
You
did
should
warn us.
never have mentioned hacking elections.
Now
Right when we get to the,
time, Kevin.
oh my God.
Biden
Just-
certainly got a hell of a lot of
no.
votes. And
Okay.
Kevin,
We lost you there as soon as you said I took part in hacking an election.
Yeah.
Your stream froze.
Okay, so the
Am I-
timing is actually weird on that. Seriously.
am I still on? I lost everybody's feed. I don't see anybody but
Yeah.
Steve.
Oh,
We're here. We're all here.
I don't see any picture. Oh, there's the pasta. I think his name is.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
I'm missing Glory. Glory disappeared.
You
There's
might-
Steve. Steve there he is. He's frozen though.
Huh.
See, on the bottom, you can click that stuff.
I don't know. We can
There's
hear you.
Glory. I see Glory. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. What the fuck was that, man?
That's
That
the
couldn't-
news you're about to tell us about hacking.
That's not my internet. That's not my internet this time, at least.
yeah.
I told Steve before the show that my internet has a funny way of deciding to quit right when I try to do something really important. I'm deep in country. I'm deep in the mountains of Mexico, and I use a 4G modem. You can actually see it in the window in the back corner, and I have an antenna, a 4G antenna in a tree, and I can see the tower. I have line of sight of the tower. It's on the opposite mountain from me. And I can go for days. I can download and pirate movies and watch YouTube videos and everything, and it won't blink, okay? And then the one time I try to do something really important, that's when but that wasn't my fault. You guys all disappeared. Where was I? I don't want to say definitively what went on in this election with regard to whether or not the final results were altered by way of intervention. To be honest with you, my gut feeling is that it was not, because of the amount of votes. But what I will say is there was intervention. There is no doubt in my mind there was intervention. I think that what we're seeing in this particular election, the intervention that was perpetrated against Donald Trump, a lot of people would love to sort of grab onto a monolithic conspiracy theory and say, there was this group in Italy, or there was this group in the CIA, or there was this group in the NSA, or whatever, and they somehow cobbled together this giant conspiracy to flip votes. I think what we're seeing, rather than something like that, which is almost never the case, these sort of monolithic conspiracy theories fail on simple common sense observation. It's impossible to hold a conspiracy like that together. I know, because I was involved in one of the greatest underground conspiracies in history, Anonymous, okay? And it was almost impossible to keep us from going to jail and being found out and being, having our various ops unraveled by the feds. It's just impossible to keep things like that together in some sort of monolithic fashion. So I would caution people, whenever you hear of some grand conspiracy, to put it aside. But I think that what we are seeing is death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, what we saw is a massive amount of rage against this man, Donald Trump, legitimate or otherwise. There was this massive amount of rage in the public. That rage was continuously gasoline was continuously thrown on that fire by people on the left, by Democrats and so-called liberals, who continuously demonized this man to the point where pretty much everybody on the left side of the body politic considered this man the Antichrist. So what you had was a situation where people felt compelled to do absolutely anything they could to ensure that this man didn't get elected. And I think that a great number of people decided to take matters into their own hands and padded the game. Like I said, did they pad it enough to throw the election? I don't think so. But they nevertheless did that, and the way that would work is you would have just tons of people, not in conspiracy, most of them almost certainly acting alone, and attacking the election results just here and there, a few votes on this voting machine because I have access to it, and I know I watched a YouTube video on how to do it, so I flip a few votes on this machine and then I go home. I cast my vote, of course, first, and then I do a little bit of rigging here and a little bit of rigging there, and then you have the vote counters. You have so many people across the country counting these votes. This is a big flaw in American democracy. It's always been my contention that it's a huge flaw to have all of these jurisdictions with literally tens of thousands of people responsible for counting these votes. You cannot possibly believe that all of these people were honest, upright, do their duty citizens. They were. Many of them, I am certain, gave into the temptation to, when I'm tallying, I wait till the observers look away to somebody else, and then I scribble a little mark here and I scribble a little mark there, and then I did my part. I flipped 100 votes for against Trump for Biden's favor, and so what I saw. I'm just going to speak for myself and this is opinion only. This is just from observing from afar and again being informed by my own knowledge of election hacking from the inside, from actually doing it. What I saw was, like I said, death by 1,000 cuts. People all over the country and perhaps all over the world just flipping a few votes here, a few votes there, and that ends up, as we saw in our own hack that we did. If you read Chapter 1 of Dark Ops, this was exactly the type of approach that we took. We disseminated. We were the first organization ever, the first group of people ever to disseminate across the world specific instructions on how to manipulate voting machines, electronic voting machines. And we encouraged people to go out and do just that, not for any one side in the election. In fact, our original plan was very anarchic. We wanted to flip votes for everybody. We just wanted to wreck the legitimacy of this style of democracy, of this way of doing elections, to show how vulnerable it is to influence and how easily it could be manipulated. That was the point of our original hack. Of course, if you read the book, you find out that things change. Partway through that hack, literally on election night, we changed our mind and decided instead to, because we had discovered some Republican hackers who were operating directly out of the Republican headquarters in Ohio, and we discovered them in the same systems that we had access to, and we decided to kick them out and to essentially, we are credited by mainstream media to this day. You can find the articles, just simply Google "Anonymous saves the election for Obama," and you will find a number of articles, a number of very brave, I might add, media outlets who decided to run with the story that we gave them. And we changed our mind. Instead of being anarchic, we literally preserved the integrity of the election and saved it for Obama, because at that time it was so close, the election was so close, that the Republican hackers and the plan that they had in place to flip the election most likely would have worked. There's a better than 50-50 chance that the Republicans would have succeeded in flipping that election. We're almost certain that Karl Rove was in charge of the operation. He had already taken over the Ohio Republican headquarters in its entirety. He based out of there. He did all of his public appearances from Ohio live during that election night. And he most likely would have succeeded in flipping the election for Obama. I think it's rather ironic that we did that in light of the fact that Obama went on to jail and imprison and persecute more hacktivists, more information activists, more whistleblowers than all of the previous presidents combined. It's rather ironic that we chose to use our power, and it was a significant power at the time. We were the first to have ever accomplished this, and it was only 6 people, and we did so in the face of enormous, it took us over a year and a half. People think that these hacks happen like on Mr. Robot, where it's in between a commercial for Nike sneakers and cereal that these hacks take place. This took over a year and a half to prepare what we ended up doing on election night. And we even had a snitch, an FBI snitch, in our crew who we unveiled. And despite enormous fear, especially on my part, I was already on the run from the FBI. I was literally already on the run from them when we did this op. And despite that fact, we persevered and went on to complete the operation. It was obviously not successful to my mind, and I state that in my book. I took a vote. I had to. My crew, even though they respected me and my leadership, it was a joint effort. And despite the fact that I was vehemently against saving the election for Obama, my crew voted to do this change at the very last minute of tactics and strategies. And to this day, I actually regret it. And I say so in my book. I wish we'd have gone ahead and just wrecked the whole fucking thing like we planned. But,
I mean, really, in hindsight, preserving an election for Barack Obama, probably not the best course of action considering what's gone. But it's not like you guys could have known that. And then now,
the argument of my crew was basically that Anonymous at that time, if you study the bigger picture of what was going on in hacktivism in 2012, Anonymous was taking a lot of hits publicity-wise. We had sort of reached a pinnacle of glory, if you will, and we were sort of on a little bit of a decline. We were a little bit sliding down. We were taking some hits in the media. There were some rogue elements in Anonymous that were doing something. Some of it was legitimate. I mean, some of it was legitimate criticism.
Well, and this is also like right around the.
And so the idea of my crew was that this would be a way to really burnish and polish our reputation with the left and the sort of standard liberals who at the time, their opinion we were still interested in. Maybe not so much now, but at the time we were still trying to win the hearts and minds sort of thing. We were still in that place where we and I think to a certain extent we also we liked that glory. I mean, there's an appeal to being a superhero. online.
For the sake of the audience, I want to put this time frame. I want to paint a picture of this time frame and what was exactly happening, because this is the 2012 election. This is the midway through Obama's presidency, right? And in 2012, in November, we were that election happened right ahead of or a year after Stratfor and HB Gary and all that shit. Was it that year, or was it the year before that those hacks took place?
All of that, and I have to be honest with you, I have to read my own book in order to. I'd have to look it up.
Lubers, do you remember?
To know the exact timelines, but you are in the general time frame of when.
Yeah, because I remember, I remember being attached to my fucking laptop over Thanksgiving weekend in 2012, waiting for those fucking little drops for those hacks to come through.
Yeah, we just have to also mention that what Axe said, we had bad publicity, but it had also to do with the downfall, like of Occupy, right? When the 2011, everyone started occupying, but when that kind of like died down and there was so much bad publicity, they started attacking everything of Anonymous that was deeply intertwined with Occupy.
Well, and Sabu had been flipped by Summer at that point.
Yeah. And so, this was during 2011,
for
2012.
For the people who are wondering what the fuck we're talking about, like Craig, Sabu was a rat who got flipped by the FBI and was a paid informant for the FBI, and who helped organize loosely the LulzSec crew, and those are the people who did a number of the higher profile hacks in like a span of 6-8 weeks, if my history is correct.
Yeah, it went way too fast. It was way too. It was way too visible.
Because that was Sony, and that was MasterCard, and that was Stratfor, and
I just want to interject that those hacks may have gotten the clicks at the time. They were the clickbait hacks. But there were, and I encourage people to read my books. You know, I remember when Gary Lang, he's a very famous documentarian and producer of movies, and he's the one who produced the movie about myself, which is coming out this year. And the first thing he said when he arrived here in Mexico to begin filming the movie about me, he said, "I read your books, and one of the things is I thought I knew everything about the history of Anonymous until I read your books, and it was really startling to him to find out, you know, the real story from the inside. There were so many more important hacks going on at that time, and they just didn't get the clickbait media attention, but they didn't need to, because they were still incredibly effective hacks. We were taking down people in power one after another with these hacks. And again, I just encourage people to read my books, not because I want to sell books, but because if you really want to understand the true history and how my perspective and my story that I tell is so much more different than everything that we've heard on all of these movies, even We Are Legion. God bless Brian Knappenberger. I love what he did with We Are Legion, but it was very topical, and it was very much following again those clickbait moments, and then Hacker Wars, which was just really I don't even want to talk about my criticism of that movie.
No, dude, we don't even have to include Hacker Wars in this.
It was so far from the way that I saw things and the way that I experienced things from the inside out that really it's almost a work of fiction in my mind. But what I tried to do in my books was try to show the things that not only I was directly involved in, so I could speak to them authoritatively, but to show that I think that the hacks that we did, for instance, the Vatican, going after the Vatican, because nobody, even WikiLeaks, and I was associated with WikiLeaks. I had access to them, and I could not get Julian or WikiLeaks or anybody to stand up for the Vatican whistleblower who ended up locked up in a broom closet in the basement of the fucking Vatican because he leaked literally every document in the Pope's desk. This guy was the butler of the Pope. He's the only man who can physically touch the Pope without asking. Okay,
this is incredible story.
This is how precious this man is, how important this man is. He's the only man who can walk unannounced into the Pope's fucking bathroom. Okay, this guy had access to everything, and he literally systematically emptied the Pope's desk because that desk is an important thing. It is where the Pope keeps all the dirt, all the shit that can't even be filed in some secret archive because they're afraid. They put it in the Pope's desk. Okay, because nobody touches the Pope's desk, all right? And the butler literally emptied that desk systematically over weeks and took it downstairs to a poor kid who also ended up in prison, in Italian prison, luckily for him, okay? And that kid was part of the IT department, and he photocopied them for the butler. And we demanded of the Vatican and the Pope that he use his power to release that man before Christmas. That was our deadline. And 3 days before Christmas, the Pope gave in. And I might add that after that operation, which was incredibly terrifying to the prelates and the people in the Vatican, because, hey, we are Legion, right? I mean, come on, right? Scary masks and the whole bit, right? And I would point out that it was months after that hack, less than a year, when Pope Benedict became the second Pope in the history of the Catholic Church to resign. I'd love to believe that we had a part in causing that man to stress out so bad that he felt he had to step down from power.
For posterity's sake, Pope Benedict is Pope Ratzenberger, who was part of the Hitler, or Cardinal Ratzenberger, who was part of the Hitler Youth. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
That's the one.
Okay. Yeah. So the Nazi.
My point simply was that during that time in 2012, 13, 14, even before 2011, that period of time, there were so many more important operations going on in hacktivism and emanating from Anonymous specifically that were completely overshadowed by the things that ended up being done by a snitch. Okay, ended up being done by a person working for the government. And they completely overshadowed the work of so many hardworking hacktivists. I mean, I was doing those hacks literally while I was running from the FBI across the border and into Canada. And yet I was still facilitating and in many cases actually organizing those operations from coffee houses as I ran literally from city to city to city back and forth across Canada 3 times. I went from coast to coast across Canada just to keep moving and literally going from coffee house to coffee house, city to city with nothing but a backpack and a laptop to facilitate these operations. And I just want to point out too, to say that, those operations are indicative of the fact that the U.S. government is blowing smoke out its ass when it says that a big, highly organized hack has to be done by a nation state. The one that comes to mind is the most recent one. They're blaming on the Russians and they say it has to be. It's so elaborate, it's so involved that it must be done by a nation state. I want to tell you, first of all, that these are lies, okay? And almost all of these hacks that are attributed nowadays in the last, say, 3 or 4 years that are attributed to nation states are actually being done by hacktivists. There are hacktivists all over the world, guys. Okay, not just Anonymous and in the United States. For instance, I love to tell people Anonymous is far stronger down here in Latin America. There are 3 times as many Anons in Latin America as there are in the United States of America, Canada, and UK, where everybody even in Anonymous, has these myopic glasses where they think, oh, well, Anonymous is sick. Anonymous is having a bad time because Anonymous is sick in America. But they don't look down here to see that this is a force to be reckoned with in Latin America. Anons are single-handedly taking down dictators one after another for the last 5 years down here in Latin America. They are leaking shit. They are hacking shit. They are disrupting government operations against protesters on the ground. And they are doing so to great effect and with the same template, the same mask, and the same principles that Anonymous has had all around the globe. They're very powerful in Africa, too. They're very powerful in the Middle East, okay?
In Asia, too. You have to remember also the Asians, right? I mean...
Right, of course, Southeast Asia. And so this myopic view that Anonymous only exists by 4chaners in the United States, Canada, and UK, it's such a myopic view, and it is so wrong. And it is... That idea is still being perpetrated by the people who were originally part of what I call the Great Civil War in Anonymous. And I explained this to Brian Knappenberger. He barely covered it in that movie, but I explained it in great detail in my book and even more detail in the documentary that's coming out about me. But that Civil War was very, very important. That is when people like myself and Greg Houch and Barrett Brown and other people came along and stole their fucking meme. We took Anonymous from the shitheads in 4chan, who to this day try to say that that's their Anonymous is the only Anonymous. It's the only authentic one. We stole their meme blatantly, openly, and turned it into the greatest meme of revolution ever in history because it was so simple. A mask, 3 or 4 principles, that's it. A mask, 3 or 4 principles, that's it. It is literally the easiest thing to fucking spread, and that was the plan, and the plan worked, guys, because there are odds now at every protest I see. Every time I see a picture of any major left-leaning protest in the world, from Nigeria to Saudi Arabia to wherever you want to fucking name it, there's always at least one dude in the background. I'll find him with a fucking Guy Fawkes mask on.
Yeah, that's
true. The sale, the possession, and the manufacture of a Guy Fawkes mask in Bahrain is a felony that will get you 10 years in prison. That's our doing, not 4chan.
Hey, okay. So before we get into a script kitty dick measuring contest, I'd like to circle back a little bit and talk about the importance of global Anons, especially the Palestinian Anons,
yes,
and the role that they played in Op Ferguson.
Can I piggyback off that too?
Yeah, for sure.
I read through Dark Ops and got to the section on Ferguson, and there was a point where you were telling them, like, no, chill, you have literal bombs flying over you, and they're saying, no, we got this. Those people in Ferguson will have our backs eventually. And I like mused over that exact section for like minutes and for like a cool minute. And then I mused it over again this morning because it was just like this amazing thing where like Anonymous kind of organized this moment of solidarity between like Black people and Palestinians that very much exists. And it's very much something that doesn't get brought up enough in the current environment of Black Lives Matter, given how co-opted they've been. And I just thought that was amazing because like it was actually kind of through the Black Lives Matter actions that I personally first heard about Anonymous, because I don't remember 2010 that well. So yeah, I mean, if you could just speak on that, like the solidarity with Anonymous Palestine and how you kind of organize together a group of people to have solidarity from Ferguson to Gaza. That's just because that was just amazing.
Well, that touches on a number of points, really to really understand that butterfly moment. And one of the things I tried to do with both of my books, and if my third book ever comes out, is to get to those butterfly moments. because that is really where history in my mind, is made. And Ferguson was a classic example of a butterfly moment. You had a black rapper, Tefpo. By the way, if he's watching, shout out to my bro, Tefpo. You had a Palestinian guy who wasn't even an activist, who just happened to be Tefpo's roommate at the time. And he was Palestinian by ethnicity. And you had myself, a white hacker on the run in a cafe in Montreal. And we were all in those places at the very moment when Mike Brown was shot. And the butterfly moment was when Tefpo stood over Mike Brown's body, took a picture, and tweeted out the now very famous tweet. I think he even retweets it every year on the anniversary of Mike Brown. We need international assistance. Will anybody on the international scene assist us? And to make a long story short, I answered that tweet. I got into a discussion with Tefpo, literally as Mike Brown's body lay in the heat, the Missouri heat, still on the streets. And literally at that moment, I asked him to convince me. I asked Tefpo to convince me. I said, black kids are getting shot all over America. It's terrible. It's wrong. It's horrible. But fucking why should I wield the entire global collective on your behalf? Why is this kid any fucking different than the dozen that are going to get shot in the next month? Convince me. And he did. He did, to make a long story short. But to go to your question about the Palestinian moment, that was there were many spine-chilling moments for me during Operation Ferguson. Certainly that moment that you describe of speaking with my Palestinian friend, who I was literally communicating with over Skype. He was in the Gaza Strip, literally in the Gaza Strip. And they were doing another bombing campaign at the time. And I could literally hear the bombs. The thuds of the bombs going down and exploding over Skype. And it really disturbed me. It was very disturbing to me that I had come to this man for help. And I want to just back up real quick to say where the history of that alliance comes from. Why did he feel he owed me that? It goes back to another chapter in Dark Ops, Operation Israel.
Operation Israel, that was
Operation Israel was, to my mind, the largest hacktivist operation in history. I don't know of any hacktivist operation before or after that has topped the raw numbers.
Let's talk about Op Israel for a moment. Because
I will. I don't want to lose track of Glory's question, so let me step through it really quick for you.
You don't step through anything quick, motherfucker.
Well, we can go back around, but I don't want to neglect Glory's question.
We got to get back to the stuff I got.
I mean, we've got election stuff that Pasta wants to talk about, and like I said to Steve before the show, I'm not well, but I will go long for you guys today if we need to. So, but Operation Israel was historic in so many ways. It was the largest number of people. I was one of the original people who came together in an Anon IRC. Actually, it's another butterfly moment. We didn't come together. We were already together in an IRC. There was a group of us sitting around an IRC telling glory stories, telling battle stories to the newbies. Which is something that I guess when you're an old warrior, that's something that's inevitable you do. And I was participating, and we had a channel with a lot of new bros, as they call them, new sisses in the channel. And we were sitting around like old warriors do, boasting about our glory days a whole fucking 2 years ago. You know what I mean? And into the IRC came this Palestinian kid. He was he turned out later, we found out he was a 15-year-old Palestinian kid. And he said, hey, you guys, you got a moment? Can I talk to you guys? And we're like, sure, go ahead. Say your piece, kid. And he said, well, the Israeli government just threatened to turn the internet off in Palestine, in Gaza Strip. And we're like, well, you know what? Pics or it didn't happen, kid. You know, how did they do this? Well, they dropped flyers. Well, do you got a picture of the flyer? In literally seconds, the kid uploaded a picture of the flyer, and we all took a look. And I think it was the fastest consensus that we ever had amongst old-time Anons to start an op. It was literally like, okay, let's do this. And I think it took less than an hour from the time that kid came into the chat and asked for our help, asked for Anonymous's help, and he had been led there. He'd been told to go there by other Palestinians who said, "Look, Anonymous might help us with this." And he took a Hail Mary. He jumped into a random IRC, just happened to be one with a bunch of OGs sitting around, again telling war stories, And he just got lucky that night. Within less than an hour, we had the Twitter set up for Op Israel, which persists to this day. You can look it up. We had a website set up, and we had a press release written and disseminated to the media, who at the time were our babies. They literally would print anything we told them to print, mainstream media. So we were in our glory in that sense. And literally in less than an hour, Op Israel was born, and it grew in an exponential way that cannot even be described. It was literally terrifying. I was in New Brunswick at the time, and we were having snowstorm after snowstorm, these horrible snowstorms. And I'll never forget looking out of my friend's window where we were running this op from his fucking living room, and looking out of his window, waiting for the fucking laser beam to hit me in the forehead from a Mossad agent to come assassinate us. We had our ISP came in the middle of the night to make sure our internet was working, and we were certain that was not a fucking random visit to make sure our internet was working. They were sent there. We were terrified. We were fucking terrified of what we had unleashed and against whom we had unleashed it. But to make a long story short, and again, I encourage people to read the chapter on Op Israel. It's fascinating. There were lots of spine-tingling moments and really heart-wrenching moments when the Palestinians really realized that they had somebody on their side. They were very empowered by it. But to make a long story short, we stopped an army, guys, and to my mind there are a lot of pivotal moments in hacktivism, but I had always believed that information could stop bullets, but it's easy to say that kind of rhetoric. It's easy to talk about that as a philosophy, but to actually see it in action. Israel stopped that operation against Gaza, and they had said just a few days before that they were going to continue it indefinitely. We don't know how long they were going to continue it past that point. Maybe we saved the Palestinians only one day, but guess what? People were dying every day. Civilians were being killed every day. So even if we only stopped that conflict, stopped that army from bombing them by one day, and I think it was probably more than that. We'll never know exactly how long they intended to continue. But even if it was only by one day, nevertheless, we did something that no other hacktivists, no other activists in history had ever done. We stopped the world's most powerful, most lethal army in its tracks, using nothing but ones and zeros, using nothing but our laptops. A bunch of people spread out all over the world on fucking radio computers and laptops, operating out of coffee houses, my friend's living room, college flop houses. By the end of that, we had perpetrated on Israel cyberspace over 75,000 discrete hacks that cost the Israeli economy in 2 weeks, $3 billion USD.
Which ironically is about
correct.
800,000 shy of what the U.S. gives Israel every year now.
Every year. And so to flash forward to Glory's question, if you read the book again, I was one of the coordinators of that op, and I'm often put in the role of the diplomat.
Whose fucking idea was that?
I've always been honest about the fact that my hacking skills are moderate. I'm not saying that they're awful, but I'm not. For instance, I'm not Jeremy Hammond. I'm not this guy who can literally touch his fingers to a computer and networks go down. My hacking skills, I work at them. I had to work at them, and I was no slouch, and I understood the basics. But my role was often as manager and as liaison with the media. Especially, I had a great relationship with the media because the whole Commander X persona thing was very approachable to them and whatnot. And so it was my role to liaison directly with the Palestinian hackers who during that op became Anonymous Palestine. Literally, literally, we took hackers in Palestine who had always been attacking Israeli cyberspace. They were not new to this, okay? And we literally molded them into what became during that anonymous Palestine. So to flash forward to Glory's question, these people, I suppose, I mean, I don't want to put thoughts in their head. I suppose they feel that they owed me. They certainly behave that way. So I reached out to them, and I reached out directly to who at the time was more or less the manager. We don't like the word leader so much, but he was the manager of Anonymous Palestine over Skype. But the interesting question, Glory, and I think you will find this aspect of it particularly interesting. The reason that I had to reach out to him for help, it was specifically for hacking assistance. We needed people to be hacking the state of Missouri government sites and the Ferguson sites and the St. Louis County sites. Why did I need that help? Why did I not have plenty of hackers in America? Ferguson was instantly a hit. It was instantly very, very popular with the masses. Why did I need that help? And it's because, and as I'm very honest in my book about, there was at the time, and to a certain extent still is, a deeply endemic racism within Anonymous. And that's just simple fucking honesty. I'm just being fucking honest. It was a white male culture that sprang partly out of 4chan, and it was very misogynist and very racist. And even after the revolutionaries took it over and made it into what we wanted it to be, that culture still was residual. It still maintained itself. And even to this day, in the West, you won't see this ever in like the African Anonymous or the Latin American Anonymous, but the Western Anonymous to this day still contains residual elements of racism and misogyny. And I literally could not get any white Western hackers to fucking help me do the dirty work. I mean, we had the people on the ground. We had the anarchists were backing us. They were already shipping medical supplies and street medics into Ferguson. In fact, the first street medics ever in the Ferguson uprising were white anarchists that we helped bus in from California. And they trained black people.
I can personally attest to that because I helped get a few of those motherfuckers on that bus from Santa Cruz County.
But that is the background to the story that you read, is that those people were there as a residual alliance. One of the things about Anonymous, and I was big on helping to cultivate this, is the idea of alliances. I really believe in cross-cultural, cross-movement alliances, and I think it's one of the things that made Anonymous so strong when I was a part of it. I still encourage people to do that, to reach out across movements. And so not only did the connection between Anonymous and Black Lives Matter make perfect sense to me, and perfect sense to them, I might add. You will not to this day hear a single person in BLM from the top down ever diss the Anonymous intervention and even the anarchist element that we openly helped to bring into it with their permission.
Pretty sure that most of that original crew is dead now, though, X. Like, most of the original Ferguson leadership team ended up getting burnt out in a car.
Well, Teppo is far from dead. And me and Teppo maintain a very, very close personal relationship to this day. And one of the things that I'm so proud of is that Teppo has resolutely stood his ground in giving fair credit to Anonymous when it comes to the sort of re-blossoming of Black Lives Matter, which I remember. I don't know how many people are familiar with Gabriella Coleman. She's an anthropologist who holds the Wolf Chair in Montreal and at a university in Montreal, and she's the only anthropologist in the world who her major place of study is direction of study is the hacker culture. And I remember contacting her right off within 24 hours of the beginning of that op. I wanted to run the press release by her that we released, the original one, which really to this day still is written up in history books and everything, that original press release that we released on the part of the Ferguson protesters and Operation Ferguson. And I wanted to run it by her. She's a very smart woman, very, she's a good writer, for instance. I wanted, grammar critiques and other stuff from her. So I sent it to her over, I believe it was IRC. And I remember she took quite a few moments to read it and I think reread it. And then the first thing that she typed me back is, actually, you guys may well be starting the next civil rights movement in America. And that's exactly the way it turned out. She was very prescient with that comment. I'm very proud of the input that we put into Black Lives Matter. That is not to say, and I have never claimed, that there would not be a Black Lives Matter had it not been for Anonymous. However, there may not have been a Ferguson uprising, because at the time they were getting crushed. And when I got involved, there was exactly 40 protesters in the streets. There was 40 people, and they were getting ready to get smushed bad. And I think that what might have happened had Anonymous not intervened immediately, as quickly as we did, and as viciously and ferociously as we did, is like so many other times when Black kids have been shot, they would have been crushed, they would have gone home, and they would have gone, well, this is what it's like to be Black in America. Instead, they were emboldened and encouraged by the assistance that we were able to bring them from all over the world, literally instantaneously. We were able to galvanize that assistance. And also, I think, to galvanize the mainstream media, because the mainstream media wasn't going to pay attention to them at that time, but they always paid attention to us at that time. Anything we did or said, if we farted and it had and said that was Guy Fawkes who just farted, they wrote a story about it. And so we were able to wield that power that we had with mainstream media to say, hey, look, this is going on in Ferguson. This is going to be a big deal because we're going to make it a big deal. And so you better pay attention, because we're going to start breaking shit. We're going to start breaking shit right now, that night. But that's to tell. I want to go back to questions, but I wanted to really pay attention to Glory's question. I really feel this last week for Black folks in America. I gained a lot of Black friends. I even gained an appreciation for Black music that I never had as a white guy. I will always be, Operation Ferguson will always be a precious moment in my life and a real turning point. As white people, as people who have white privilege, we are born with white privilege and can never get rid of it. I always thought of myself before Ferguson as a very enlightened individual, as a person who was very much woke, I guess is the word that so many people like to use, woke, right? But I found out from Operation Ferguson, if you're a white person, you can never be too woke, okay? And I want to make a comment, because a lot of Black friends of mine that I treasure, that I've had ever since Ferguson, have been in contact with me these last several days with regard to this whole thing on the Capitol. And I want to say to people who are listening to this, what I'm hearing again and again from my Black friends is, we don't want cops to go out there and beat and shoot these terrible white people. We don't want them to treat them like they treat us. We want them to treat us like they treat them.
Yes.
And I want to make this absolutely clear, because I owe these friends of mine, because I have a platform they don't have, and I have a voice that they don't have, as white a cracker as I might be. And they are all saying this universally. We are not calling for the cops to fucking beat and shoot these people. That is not the solution. The solution is that they should be treating everyone like they treat these white people.
Do you fucking hear that, Blue Check America?
Yes.
Do you fucking hear that, Rose Twitter? Do you fucking hear that, you little fucking pussy ass progressive fucking fake woke ass pieces of shit? Do you fucking hear that?
fucking hear that. And it's not just
I want to add just.
friends
I want
saying
to add
it,
just.
my ass saying it too. So
I want to add just one more thing as a side note. They're all saying universally, this, we don't give a fuck about the Capitol getting fucking raided and smashed and whatever. This ain't our business. We did our part. We voted for Biden when we thought he was a fucking creep and we didn't want to vote for him, but we voted for him anyway and we got him elected. It's our job. Our job. We did our job. We don't give a fuck about this shit going on. The white people can do whatever the fuck they want with each other because that ain't our house. And it's never been our house. It's the capital of the colonizers. And that's what I'm also hearing from my black friends is ultimately they don't give a flying fuck about what went on in the Capitol on Wednesday. It's not our fucking business. It's not even our fucking capital because we're not enfranchised to even have any part of it. It's the fucking white colonizers' fucking capital. Why should we give a flying fuck about that shit? And so whatever, but until they did their job. That's what they're saying to me. They did their job. They voted for Biden, but that's until you make them believe that that's their house. This problem in America, systemic racism, that only really began to get a spotlight shined on it in Ferguson. It didn't start with Mike Brown. This shit is 400 fucking years old. Okay, until you can make black people feel like upset that Capitol got fucking wrecked and that shit was smashed and shit was smeared all over the rotunda and shit like that. Until you can make them upset about that, until you can make them feel like that was an affront to them, then you are not even close to solving systemic and cultural racism in America. You have a long way to go from the people that I've been talking to. A long way to go. Okay. And I think that's sad and that's a shame because what kind of nation do you have where you have, almost half of the people really just don't even give a shit what happens to the fucking country, the government, okay? So I think that white progressives especially are very disappointing to me. They will always be disappointing. I was disappointed with them in Operation Ferguson when I had to turn to Palestinians to get help with the hard work and the dirty work and the very, very illegal work that we needed to do in Op Ferguson to make it a success. I had to reach out to foreign people, to Palestinians, to get that work done. And I think to this day, I am very disappointed in general with white progressives. I am less so with Antifa. I find that an intriguing movement and I find that an empowering movement, but even they could work better and harder and to be more inclusive to the ideas and the thoughts and the concerns of the people of color in the United States of America. And I would also add a side note that goes just as strongly. I feel just as strongly about the people of color's issues and problems as I do of the Native American issues. I think they are on the same track and they are absolutely equal in my mind in importance. And you see even less, really, to be honest with you, you see even less of that in the modern progressive sort of front and movement. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's not just on the part of the weak-ass liberals, and certainly not on the part of the conservatives. The people who consider themselves progressive and transgressive need to do a lot more work, because I'll bet you if I started another black op this afternoon, I could pick at random any of the people who have been shot in the last month, black people in the back, all sorts of, the horror just goes on and on. But the slaughter of black people by white American police still goes on and on. I could pick any of those and start an op today, okay, for them. And I guarantee I would still have difficulty with the white element in Anonymous coming on board and doing their part. And that still exists, and that needs to be struggled against, and needs to be fought against. White people need to understand what I said in the beginning of this spiel. You cannot be too woke. Okay.
So here's my thought about Antifa, and it's the thought that I've had the entire time, and that's if you can show me that there aren't at least an equal or greater amount of feds for every 106-pound black skinny jeans, pink-haired fucking freedom fighter, then I will build you a new house.
You can't let that stop you. That has been the case since day one of Anonymous, okay? And we showed that.
I'm not saying stop. I'm just saying, like, I don't trust
the only thing you can, and you want to have an open movement. You don't want to close your movement off and seal it off either. That won't work. I tried that in the 70s and 80s. I talk about it in my books. Things like Animal Liberation Front and Earth Liberation Front. We did a lot of good. But we were a closed movement, okay, of people, and we were crushed because of that. We didn't have the mass appeal. We didn't have the mass power behind us. We did a bunch of stunts that got a lot of news, and then we were smashed into the earth. And I'm very honest in my books that I don't believe that approach works. I believe in the approach of Anonymous and other movements like it, where you open the doors wide open and you just let everybody in. What you need to do, though, is you need to be aware enough to study, and there are books on this that you can get from anarchist book publishers that will specifically show you how to ferret out those individuals, how to detect them, and how to disenfranchise them from the movement. And you need to have an entire cadre within your movement dedicated to that single purpose task of unveiling the snitches, unveiling the rats, and unveiling the feds. And but you cannot and you must not give up the idea of an open-ended movement. You must take the damage, you must take the hit, and you must do what you can to mitigate it. I encourage people, follow the people who have gone in your footsteps on this one. Read the books of people who have found techniques and found ways to discover these individuals and ferret them out. But don't close your movement off. A closed movement will never fucking win. They will smash you down one by one. And what happens, and we saw this with so many movements, American Indian movement, we saw this too. We saw this again with Earth Liberation Front and Animal Liberation. What they will do is they will turn your movement into a cause of just getting your own people out of jail. I remember Leonard Peltier saying that our movement ended up becoming just about getting people out of prison. And we lost any ability to affect the change we were originally trying to change because all of our effort, all of our resources, all of our money, and all of our people were dedicated just to saving the people that were in prison. That's what happens in a closed movement. Okay, in an open movement like Anonymous, you can concentrate on both because you have enough people involved that you can still continue the work of the movement while simultaneously taking care of the people who are fallen with groups like Free Anons and stuff like that. So there's some advice to the progressives out there. I think the progressive movement has a long way to go. I really do. I think, and the transgressive movement for that matter, Antifa, Anonymous, still have a long way to go, especially in the West. They have really come off the rails in the last few years, and they could be so much more effective. I encourage people to study the Latin American transgressive movements and the African transgressive movements. Those two in particular are particularly effective at what they do, and they're not doing anything new. They're doing what we originally proposed and did back in the glory days that everybody loves to talk about, Occupy, and when Anonymous was at its peak and everything. We taught them, okay? And they're still doing it. They have never left those ways of doing things. And so I encourage people, especially Latin America, to study. If you think transgressivism does not work in America, study the Latin American transgressive movements. Even those, just stick with those that you're familiar with, like Anonymous and the Occupy sort of mentality, and you will see that they simply continued on the track. I mean, they've innovated, okay, with tactics and stuff, but they've continued along the main track that we had going for us in 2012, 13, and 14, 11, that era that is considered the glory era. They have continued with that, and you can get back to that, but it means being a lot more woke than I see the transgressives and the progressives being in the United States of America today.
X, I want to reply to this real fast because you made like a comment about including everyone, right? And making it more inclusive. And also the whole decentralized idea of Anonymous that's been very, very, very effective. But if you look at like Black Lives Matter, for example, in the US, what bothered me most about it is that they were focusing just on the US, right? And but when you look at the entire world and like this history of colonization in Africa and everything, I was thinking like you have to also make this more about the entire world and what is going on in Africa and how these people have been oppressed by Western nations in history. And when you say like we have to include everyone, that is the first thing that comes in mind, right? Make it
Well, let me comment on that. A couple of things. One, of course, you're right. You can never have too many alliances. You can never be. I believe in the alliance sort of way. Okay. And so while I'll say right off the bat, you're obviously right in a very general sense. Let me just point some things out. The Palestinian Black Lives Matter alliance. Okay. There's still two separate, completely different issues going on there. You cannot lose sight of that. The Palestinians are fighting the Israeli army. The black people in America are fighting white police officers. Okay, and both sides are losing lives, losing a lot of lives. Another example, Black Lives Matter and the anti-police movement in Nigeria. While they are very similar, they are still very, very different, okay? So you can support each other as an alliance, being there for each other. And I saw that, for instance, with the Nigerian protests. The Black Lives Matter really led the way in getting American transgressives and progressives to support those Nigerian protesters. I think that more could be done to support them, but that's always the case. But the key to alliances is understanding that each battle is separate and different, and all of these battles deal with saving lives, stopping the killing. Okay, especially when it comes to Black Lives Matter and the peripheral things like the Palestinians and the African movements to stop the political killings and stuff like that. So while it's important to have alliances and strong alliances, it's important to be there for each other and shine your light on their issues. It would be a mistake in my mind to bleed the issues together into one big, say for instance, Black liberation movement around the world. That would be a mistake to me, in my mind, because it's the specialization. It's one of the reasons why I, against the advice of many, many high-level upper dude Anons, began right off the bat creating national Anon cells. And I was actually directly responsible for creating a great number of them. And I took so much heat back in 2012 and 13 for doing that. They're like, you're dividing Anonymous. There's just one Anonymous. There's no such thing as Anonymous Venezuela. There's no such thing as Anonymous Libya. There's no such thing as Anonymous Kenya, which, by the way, a shout out to my Anons in Kenya. I love you guys. They're some of the best Anons in the world is Anonymous Kenya. But so many people, and I actually went to ground with it. I had them create little flags for themselves, little Anon logos, do their own little emblems and shit, right? And really break it down like that and make it granular. And the reason for that is it's not to divide Anonymous. It's not to try to divide the movement. It's to try to make sure that there are people on the ground in those places who can specialize on the issues that specifically affect them. And so that's just one example of how you can have a global movement of alliances, but yet still have everybody exclusively focusing on the stuff that they can do something about, that is in their backyard, that they can affect. So while I agree with you, Mark, that there's more can be done to broaden these movements and make these alliances, I disagree that something like, for instance, Black Lives Matter should become a sort of global Black liberation movement, because they have their problem has absolutely nothing in common with, say, what's going on in Nigeria. That's not to say it's not any more horrible, that it's not any more important. I'm and people are dying in both cases. But look at who's doing the killing. Okay, and you see that these are very different issues. They're going to be affected with very different tactics and strategies. And I think that Black Lives Matter should stay very, very focused. And I'm not one to give advice, especially to BLM. Okay, I was very careful, and you see in my book where I was very careful not to tread on thee when it came to BLM more than any other movement I ever got involved in. I wanted them to lead from the front, and I was very cautious. But I will just give this advice to them because I think it's solid. Stay focused on the one thing that fucking matters: white cops killing black people for no reason. This is what needs to fucking stop. After that, we can talk about all the other shit that needs to be changed. But until we deal with the fact that black people to this day are getting shot in the streets and killed for no fucking reason at all, until we deal with that very fundamental fucking problem and stop the killing, there's no way that I'm going to ever pay attention to any other fucking part of anything. Okay? I want those cops to stand the fucking down. It's like Jesse Jackson said, just stop shooting us in the back. Just that much. Just that one step would be a fucking step forward. Okay? And just last month, we see another guy shot 7 times in the fucking back, unarmed. What the fuck?
Glory, would you like the Black Pill Commander X on BLM?
So, I mean, I remember that there was some moments of, solidarity with BLM and the NSARS movement in Nigeria. But I'll also add, just from being, on the ground at these protests over time, Black Lives Matter, unfortunately, due to systemic and institutional mechanisms of the national security state, they've been thoroughly co-opted. Like, I remember reading about Op Ferguson. It was just in stark contrast to the current climate of Black Lives Matter, the organization, because while they were flying Palestinian flags in Ferguson today, when Palestine was essentially thrown under the bus by the UAE and Morocco, and when Palestinian groups in LA tried to hold protests for that in front of the embassy, they got virtually almost no help from Black Lives Matter, despite the history of cooperation. And there's a significant degree of co-option at the leadership of Black Lives Matter. That's not to say that on the ground activists don't have their hearts in the best place, but when you have people in Black Lives Matter trying to essentially sheepdog people into voting for a segregationist like Joe Biden, and really taking away what they do with their rhetoric is they try to take away from the anti-police issue. Like, I go to Black Lives Matter protests from the standpoint of being anti-police, but it gets watered down a lot with, liberal rhetorical bullshit that's just unnecessary, and that's essentially divisive to all of us. And they're also incredibly performative now. Like, Black Lives Matter here in LA, they're fucking notorious for never protesting past like 5 p.m. So it's just, let me give you some advice that I've already given, and as an example. Okay, here's what you do: you take the movement back. Okay. Yeah. The same way that the revolutionaries in Anonymous, the people who wanted to set the world on fire in Anonymous, took that movement, and trust me, I understand the idea of centralized control, because when we did that, there were a handful of Anons who ran the whole fucking shebang back in 2010 and 2011. Literally a handful of people ran all of Anonymous back then. And we did the hard work. We stood up and we formed a revolution within a revolution. And we took that movement back, and we didn't leave behind anything. We took the name, we took the hashtags, we took the mask, we took it all. And we gave it to the people around the fucking world against the will of those power brokers who at the time
ran the whole show. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't pretty. Okay? We took a lot of fucking heat from our own fucking kind. Okay? But there's my advice to you, Glory. That's what you need to do, or don't, and start something new. But
Yeah,
I think you would be giving up a lot. I think you would be giving up a lot, the same way we would have if we'd done the same thing. The name of Anonymous was very powerful. Those hashtags were very powerful. We said no. We could have done that too. We could have gone off and started our own thing. Okay. But instead we said, no, this belongs to everybody. It already has power that we helped to give it. You helped to give BLM the power it has today. With every time you ever tweeted a BLM hashtag, why don't you own a part of it? You have a stake in it. So you can do one of two things as a movement. You can either go your own way and start something new, or you can say, fuck that. We are going to take that from you, and we are going to give it to everybody. And I promise you it will work. It won't be easy. It will be painful. It will be distasteful at times, okay? And it will be hard work, but it can be done, and it can be done by a small amount of people. It doesn't take having to convince thousands of people that this is the way to go with BLM. It only takes a handful of you. There was only a handful of us that did it to say, no, we're going to grab this. We're going to decentralize it. Don't make leaders out of us. We're doing this for you guys. Here, take it, and make it happen. And I would just encourage you, if you need help, if you need tips on how to do that, to study the history of the revolutionaries in Anonymous and how they managed to do that. Using cells, for instance, autonomous cells like BLM Alabama, BLM Mississippi, BLM Kansas. Every fucking state should have one, even if it's one fucking black person sitting in his living room. He can and individualize it. Maybe have them all make their own little BLM logos, and you can break it down granular into cities: BLM Chicago, BLM Atlanta, and then decentralize the whole fucking thing that way. And when the critics and especially these leaders come for you, you just have to stand your ground. That's the thing. You just have to stand your ground and say, look, we believe this is the way. BLM belongs to all of us. We're going to fucking decentralize the whole fucking movement, whether you like it or not. And take the heat that comes with that. Just, pony up. So there's my advice to you. I mean, I hate giving advice to people, especially in the black movement, but there's my advice to you.
I definitely take that though, just because like with everything that I try to do personally it's like just going to anyone from any movement really, and like I'll go to Black Lives Matter rallies just to talk about like other stuff, namely, in this time especially, it's Julian Assange and his persecution. And like I'll even go to Stop the Steal rallies and try to encourage people to follow a narrative that's not like voter fraud, ghost commies bullshit. And it's like I agree with that to a degree, where it's like with whatever we get, use that as a full send and try to take that energy to really just fucking punch a hole through the oligarchy. But at the same time, there also has to be a recognition of just the degree of co-option at the national level of Black Lives Matter. But there's still a lot of genuine activism and energy on the ground with the movement. So yeah. And thanks for talking about Op Israel, because that was fucking awesome. I realized while I was reading it that like I never heard about Operation Israel in class, and I'm an international relations major, and I took an international security class where we did a whole ass unit on cybersecurity, cyber attacks, cyber warfare, and not once was Anonymous mentioned. Not once did Operation Israel even come into the foreplay, despite the fact that we talked about Israel's cyber attacks on other nations such as Syria and Iran, but no once was Anonymous mentioned. So I found that curious. Yeah.
So many opportunities have passed me by in my life because I simply don't have enough of me to go around. but one of them was a professor from a university in Palestine, actually wrote to me years after that operation and wanted to co-author a book with me about the intervention that Anonymous did during that operation and the effect that hacktivism in general had and continues to have. It continues to inform the Palestinians who are struggling for liberation in Palestine. And it's one of my deepest regrets that I didn't find the ability and the time to do that with him. But I'm glad
Pasta has been waiting so patiently, and he looks like he's ready to just fucking explode.
Please, guys, we should cover everything. We should cover everything. So
like he just like he looks like he's trapped on an elevator, and someone just dropped a fucking deuce like 6 feet away from him. He's like, my car, I just want to.
What did I get into? What did I get into?
Pasta,
Pasta, you had the floor.
Take a swing, brother. Take a swing.
I had it for a while.
Thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it, and I love your.
There's plenty of time, guys. We can go long. You got lots of people watching.
I have to do another show with my crew because yesterday we were not being able to hook up online. But let's back to the hacktivism and the hacking of 2012. So in 2012, you said you were going across the border of Canada and the United States. You were running around with a laptop, whatnot. There's been an argument in this election right now that the fact is that none of the machines, the tabulation machines from Dominion, ES&S, Hart, Smartmatic, have internet, that there's an air gap. But you were saying something to the fact that you were hacking or stopping hacking from votes in that election. Where were you stopping them from, and where were those votes at?
Well, that Operation Vendetta, had two parts to it, two components. One of them, and this was decided early on, and we worked on it for, like I said, a year and a half after we set this sort of strategy. And it was really a two-pronged approach. One of them was clearly the dramatic break-in into the Ohio and Florida vote counting systems, the actual electronic infrastructure that is used to count those votes. And that was, of course, very dramatic. It was done by a small handful of people. But the other approach that we took was to devise and test and disseminate widely to people a series of hacks for the voting machines themselves. And it's been a lot of years now. I cannot remember a lot of the details of those hacks. They went out in the form of videos and written instructions. But I do remember one in particular, and I'll show you how easy this is done. One of them involves simply placing a magnet, a very powerful, they call them, I think they're called rhodium magnets, but they're the very, very powerful ones. To buy one of these at Radio Shack and to place it in a very, very specific spot on the side of the particular voting machine. Now, these hacks were done by models. Each model being very different, had a very different approach to it. Some of them I do remember involved inserting thumb drives into open USB ports that were accessible if you maybe just looked behind the machine. But one in particular,
about magnets too.
One in particular sticks in my mind. Just to give you an example of how easy this was, is to place a magnet, and depending on what you wanted to do, you could put the magnet in different places. Like, for instance, if you wanted to take votes away from Obama, there was a place to put it on the machine. And then if you wanted to take them from Mitt Romney, if you wanted to just destroy, which was what we were encouraging, actually, destroy all the counts sort of equally, just randomly fuck with everybody's vote, then there was another spot on the machine to put this magnet. Now, I don't remember the model. I don't remember the details. I just remember that was one of the hacks involved the simple placement of a very powerful magnet on the side of the machine. Now, I would ask anybody to tell me how the internet is involved in that in any way, shape, or form. It really would not have mattered a damn. That hack had to do with the machine itself. So the short answer to your question is it doesn't matter a damn if these things are connected to the internet. They're physical machines. And so you can physically manipulate them. And you're given the privacy to do so. Because of a private vote in America, there's a curtain that closes around you. You're alone with the fucking machine for minutes, many, many minutes. Certainly it would be suspicious if you were in there for a half hour or if you tried to drag equipment in with you. But that's what we tried to make these hacks very, very easy. With at the most, it would be need a thumb drive was the biggest equipment that you would need for them, and a magnet, again, being the smallest. And there were even some that involved pushing certain buttons at the same time. If anybody's familiar with the Control-Alt-Delete on your computer, and the things that you can do by pushing those 3 buttons at the same time, many of the hacks were similar to that, where we discovered that pushing a series of keys simultaneously on the machine would cause certain effects that were supposed to be. A lot of the security on these machines was originally, I don't know now because I'm out of the game, so I can't speak to what they're like now, but a lot of the security that we discovered on these machines was what we call security by obscurity. So they would just hope that nobody discovered this shit, in other words. Because, you know, well, all honest voters, right, in America, who's going to go in there and start pushing random keys all at the same time? That won't happen, right? So we can make it that so the maintenance guy can get in and do something easy. We'll just make it easy for him to get in. And that's why these things exist. They don't exist out of nefarious purposes. The other thing that you cannot talk about these voting machines without bringing up the obvious thing that none of these systems should be closed source. None of these systems, and they are all proprietary, they are all closed source. And this is an incredibly dangerous way to create these voting machines. The absolute best way to secure any complex system is to open source it. Because there are people, there are nerds, there are geeks who literally get off on sitting there all day long, going through line after code on GitHub and finding the broken pieces of software. And they get off on it. And many of them don't even do it for the money or the bug rewards, which should be offered anyway, because they encourage even more people to do it, okay? But bug bounties, okay? But there are people who will do it just to embarrass people, just to fuck with them. It's like almost like another form of hacking, okay? To break these systems without even having to touch them, just by looking at their code and seeing, hey, this is fucking really broken, guys. Check this out, and embarrass those people. Now, that is the absolute best way. Open source is the best way to secure any complex system. There should be at most a handful of operating systems used for these voting machines, software and operating systems, and they should be open sourced. And then you will begin to find a secure way to do voting machines. I am not one of those people who says that we should go to an all-paper ballot. In fact, I'm quite the opposite. I think you should be able to vote using an app on your phone. And I absolutely know that there's a way to do that and secure it. But you would have to open source such a system over the course of months and years and have the brightest brains in hacking pick away at it, black hats and white hats, pick away at it and pick away at it until you came up with a system. And no system is ever going to be 100% foolproof, but you could come up with a system that is secure enough that would enfranchise. Think how enfranchising that would be. How intimidating was it, especially during this election, to have to go out there to them fucking polls, even the mail-in fucking shit. With COVID and everything, you still got to go out of your house. You still got to touch envelopes and shit that other people have touched. You still got to get next to a mailbox where everybody's been breathing in it all day long. I mean, all of it was so fucking intimidating to physical voting. How fucking enfranchising would it have been, especially to the minority votes and the ethnic votes, if everybody could have voted with an app on their fucking phone?
If we wanted actual democracy, we wouldn't have a fucking oligarchy being controlled by intelligence agencies.
If you want a true democracy, you want as many people voting as possible. That's
correct.
That's just the bottom line. And the way to do that is internet voting. Okay? And this hue and this cry, even from my fellow hackers and my fellow information activists who say there's no way to secure something like that. nothing is 100% foolproof, but if you could make it 99% foolproof, you'd still have something more enfranchising and better than the system you have now. Instead, what I'm hearing is everybody, including information activists and hackers, talking about we need to go back to a paper ballot. Like that can't be manipulated, okay? You still got somebody that's got to count that shit. Okay,
Yeah.
and they can put their own prejudices and their own nefariousness into that fucking process. And if you want to take it even a step further, you could create a unified system of voting that uses the only scientifically proven, unalterable, fudgeable ledger in the world, and that is the blockchain, RCP protocol.
Yeah.
It's so fucking simple. Every voter in America gets a fucking token, and they fucking vote with that token. And you would, again, it's not, is it foolproof? No, you're always going to have the human element, people stealing tokens or whatever, but it is as close as you could get, and it is literally scientifically proven. Satoshi Nakamoto, his innovation was not money. Everybody thinks it was about money. It was about Bitcoin, which is a currency. It is a unalterable, proven, adulterable ledger of anything. You can do anything
quantum
with
computing.
Even that, I would question it, because it doesn't rely on encryption. You've got to study the math of what Satoshi Nakamoto did. It has more to do with mathematics than it does with encryption. Okay, but I think it will be a long, long time before anybody finds a way to be able to adulter a well-functioning blockchain. And I know this for a fact. You are talking to somebody, again, I'm speaking from experience. I have created myself 3 cryptocurrencies that are still trading on the open market today. Irish Coin, from a bunch of developers who hired me in Dublin. They're using it for tourism now. Very successful coin. Mazda Coin, which was created specifically for the Lakota Sioux on the Pine Ridge Reservation at their request. I even invented the name of that one and the fucking logo and everything. Okay. And I programmed that blockchain. And I forget the third one now. It escapes me. My brain is not functioning. But so I know that these blockchains are easy to create. I did those chains in a matter of weeks. I created those chains. Okay. It was as simple as forking a copy of Bitcoin or a copy of Litecoin into my GitHub and changing a few things here and there, altering a few graphics, and there you go. It's a blockchain. Blockchains are almost impossible to corrupt. In fact, it is my opinion that currently they are impossible to corrupt. If they are properly deployed by a person with even a smidgen of programming knowledge, a blockchain is absolutely impossible to corrupt. It will remain so for quite some time, quantum computing notwithstanding. And it is mathematical. It has more to do with the math of how the chain works than it has to do with encryption. And I encourage people to study this. But electronic voting could be done without it. But it is my opinion that it is absolutely the fairest and best way. There would be no argument, and there would be the one thing that would be eliminated is this giant long wait to count the votes, which is where so much of the nefariousness is taking place, is in that window of opportunity that is open, and now it's getting longer and longer. This is the second or the third national election where I've seen it go. But in my time as a kid, in my time growing up, all of this shit was decided by 8 o'clock that fucking night. Okay, now we have these huge windows of days and weeks where this process is drawn out, and that's where your human element can come in. That's where your nefariousness of the doubt about that vote can come in. With blockchain voting, you would push one fucking button, boom, the state would pop up, and it would be undebatable. It would be undebatable. It would literally be conclusive, and it would be done literally in a millisecond, as quick as somebody can push a single button. That vote would pop up. And in fact, with blockchain technology, you have something known as a block explorer. Anybody right now, any person can go to any of a dozen block explorers on the web right now on your browser, and you can see every single transaction that was ever made in the history of Bitcoin. Every single transaction is there, transparent for the light of day from a web browser explorer. Anybody. So anybody could audit these votes. Anybody who had any doubt whatsoever that this vote or that vote, using this technology that I have for years advocated, this technology as a way to do elections, and anybody in the world could audit them and comment on what they see. It is literally the most transparent way. Every single vote would appear in the blockchain for all to see.
Yeah. What was the What was the motivation when you guys were going to blow up this 2012 election? When you were going to just blow it up just to show the system is bad and wrong? What were you hoping to happen before you and the crew decided to change it to just protect the integrity of the election rather than
anarchy and chaos, the delegitimization of American democracy in general, the delegitimization of the way that democracy is done on a practical level, the way that elections are run on a practical level. As a black hat hacker, a true black hat hacker, not the ones that you hear about stealing credit cards, the object is always to show the weakness in the system. And that was our primary goal. Our primary technical goal was to show the weakness in these voting systems across the board, the multiple jurisdictions, how that's a bad idea, and to advocate for a better way to do the voting on a technical level and on a political level. It was because at that time, and still to this day, we were very, very angry at the United States of America. We wanted to do something that would hurt them and damage them. And so it's, I guess, in a way, it was like, why would you bash out the windows of Starbucks during a march? What does that have to do with anything? Well, it's fun to break shit. And it's fun to break shit that belongs to people that you don't like. And so on that level, it was just sort of a base transgressive protest against a country, an empire, really, that we were having and continue to have a big problem with.
Well, guys, I wish you would have done it.
So do I.
I wish you guys would have done it because, really, to say the truth, things needed to be blown up. Guys, that's all the questions I have. I have to get on. We have a show in about 18 minutes.
Thank you, Pasta. Thank you.
Definitely. And, hey, man, I hope everything works out well for you, Professor X. Professor X.
Thank you. Thank you for your so much. Hey, Pasta, thank you for your thoughtful questions. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your insights.
Not too many people talking about this and looking into the truth of what's really going on. And I encourage you to continue to dig into it. And I make myself available to you privately anytime you want to ask some more questions, or if you've got something coming up that you need some answers on, let me know.
Definitely. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Mr. Poikinen, Mrs. Gloria Jones, Mr. Mark. I appreciate it.
We'll see you soon, brother.
Much love, Pasta.
Lubers, you've been sitting quietly and patiently.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said like it will be like probably his last interview. We don't know, so I'm just giving him the respect to talk about.
Real quick, I want to address a couple of things in the chats. Justin Rumsby, Rumsby, thank you very much for the super chat. I'm glad you're here. Please hang out. We encourage true debate and conversation. Kat, Benny and Whitney are both coming on soon. Okay. Like I just got back into town a couple of days ago. I still haven't unpacked DC yet. This afternoon, we're going to have Jason Burmis and hopefully Tedros Speaker Mariam back on, because both of those gentlemen were on the ground in DC with me. We already did a show with Pasta and Fee about it, but I'm trying to collect everybody that I can that was on the ground for the Capitol thing, so that we can genuinely put this together, because what I witnessed and what Fee said she witnessed and what Pasta said he witnessed was a real-time color revolution false fucking flag in at like right in front of us in real time. So to help with that too, by the way, both Whitney and Benny have been incredibly prescient on all this. Benny X, yeah, you're familiar with Bill Benny, right? You know who he is?
I have to admit that I don't. So
He's the NSA whistleblower who exposed what was it? I believe he wrote Thin Thread, and the NSA went with Stellar Wind instead. He was their like primary code breaker for a number of years. He told us that when it comes to election integrity, that there's no such thing as a glitch. That when a voting machine switches 6,000 votes from Trump to Biden, that's not an accident. That's a feature, not a bug. And he's also said that the SolarWinds hacks and a number of the more higher profile hacks that have been blamed on nation states lately carry all of the signatures of an updated version of Marble Framework, which was exposed in Vault 7.
Well, I can't comment other than to point out the obvious. Yes, the software glitch is not a glitch, but the question then becomes who actually inserted the nefarious code. Was it the company or was it people doing that? And we showed with our own hacks back in 2012, it's very, very easy to introduce new code into these machines. They have exposed ports in places they shouldn't have. They, again, can be manipulated by something as simple as a magnet on the outside of the casing of the machine. So while I agree with him that it's not there by accident, most likely, the question then becomes who put it in. And to comment on these bigger hacks that we've seen recently, and the continuous insistence by the United States government that hacks this big can only be done by nation states. I want to point out that there are all sorts of hacktivists all over the world, and I have shown in my books and in my stories that a handful of hacktivists can wreak havoc on a scale that is unprecedented. You can bring nation states as powerful as Israel to their knees with a few people from their living rooms. Now, the important thing to remember about that is that it's not just the good guys that have that power of hacktivism. There are hacktivists all over the world. There are hacktivists in China who constantly gets blamed for hacking at a nation state level, but yet you ignore the fact that there is perhaps as many as 1 million hacktivists in China. And what are those hacktivists going to be interested in? Are they going to be interested in things like anonymous and free speech and Black Lives Matter? No. They're going to be hacking against what they believe, which is against the West and against targets in the West, right? There are hacktivists in Russia, okay, who, in my opinion, and I have stated this clearly, and by the way, WikiLeaks openly agreed with me, they are responsible for the DNC leaks and the leaks that came out. It was Ukrainian, Romanian, Bulgarian, and Russian hacktivists who did that hack and stole that material and gave it to WikiLeaks, okay? And they did it because they had their own agenda against the United States of America and against the West, and they are hacktivists. Now, you often hear bandied about this idea of state-sponsored and state-sanctioned. There are two different things, okay? State-sanctioned, state-sponsored is when they actually have agents in their intelligence agencies go out and do these hacks, okay? And then you have another one, state-sanctioned. Now, I don't doubt for a minute that Russia does very, very little to run to ground and arrest hacktivists who attack American targets. That is what we would call state-sanctioned, okay? Mm-hmm. They just turn the other way, okay? But don't for a second think that we don't have that here in the United States of America. Go and look up a dude named the Jester. He was literally my arch nemesis online for a decade, okay? This dude.
I can even mentioning him on air.
Okay. Okay, yes. The jester, okay? Now he can hack any target he wants in China, in Russia, even in America. He will hack Al Jazeera, okay? He did so. In fact, he did so one time to take an interview down that Julian Assange was giving. He hacked Al Jazeera. He hacked Russian television a number of times and bragged about it in real time on his Twitter feed. This is a network, a United States, RT America, a United States broadcasting company. He took it off the air in real time and bragged about it in real time on his Twitter. There, I guarantee you, the FBI never even so much as flinched to open an investigation against him for that hack, okay? And then you have hacktivists in America that are clearly not state sanctioned, like Anonymous, okay? And they arrest us, they put us in prison for fucking 12, 15 fucking years and run us out of our country like me. And so don't think for a second that America does not also have its state sanctioned hackers and I will point out it's state sponsored hackers, because if you don't think the NSA and the CIA are busy right now with 1,000 fucking hackers fucking hacking every other country in the world that they disagree with, you're just fucking crazy.
The NRO in general, which is a 3-letter agency that not a lot of people really get to hear about a lot. But the NRO is the National Reconnaissance Office. It's attached to the NSA. It is basically a fucking way station for hackers. State-sponsored, state-sanctioned hackers. Exactly what X is talking about here. We're going to do an entire show on the NRO coming up in February. And I don't know if we'll be on YouTube at that point, but it'll probably be the last show we do on YouTube.
I want to add something.
Go ahead, Mark.
I want to add something to what you were saying that has to do with perspective. When people think like that the major hacks are being done by governments or government-sponsored corporations, etc. I want to give this perspective. You have to realize that at this point, the places where they attempt to recruit their hackers is in this hacktivist community. They know that the greatest minds are these people who are really obsessed with technology, who are really obsessed with hacking, who make this is their life, right? These are not the people who get 4 or 6 years education in some IT college, right? No, these are people who are really obsessed with hacking, and the state attempts to recruit there. And so just the perspective is you have to understand that there are plenty of skilled people who are not involved with any government, right? And
well, that's my thing. That's my thing. Is this is insulting? First of all, on a very basic level, as a hacktivist, it's insulting to hear people go on television and say, "Well, this could not possibly have done by anybody but a state-sanctioned state-sponsored operation. Only these intelligence agencies have the wherewithal and the resources." It's insulting because the whole thing about hacktivism is it's a leveling of the playing field, okay? For a period of time during the sort of glory days that we've been talking about, I wielded from a laptop on the run in Canada geopolitical power. And that's not bragging. That's just the simple fucking truth of the matter. I wielded geopolitical power, and I wasn't the only one. There were dozens and dozens of high-level hacktivists around the world, and especially in the West, who at that time were individually on their own with nothing more than a laptop wielding geopolitical power. The idea that these hacks are somehow so complicated and so complex that only a state could do them is at a very basic level an insult to hacktivists and to hacktivism, because anybody can wield this power. Anybody can do this shit. And it isn't even rocket science. As I've said before, I'm not terribly good with a lot of stuff that some other hackers like Julian Assange and others are just wizards at. You know what I mean? I struggle, and I read stuff and I research to do my hacks I work at it, okay? But I'm still able to achieve incredible results single-handedly or with even just with a handful of comrades working together. So it is an insult to hacktivism around the world. And again, what Mark said, it's important to realize that people are hacktivists, are good hacktivists around the world, and all of them have their own political agendas. To deny that is to just say that these people are invisible and don't exist, and it's just not true. And so again, when the U.S. government immediately leaps to this idea of, well, it's got to be a state-sponsored hack because it was so insidious, and the solar winds thing is incredible. It makes me laugh. They were into everything for a year, but they disregard, first of all, the power of an individual hacktivist and small groups of hacktivists. They disregard the resources that they have, and they also disregard the patience that a hacktivist has. This hack that they're talking about now, the solar winds thing, was ongoing for a couple of years, and that's just when they started. That's just when they got in the door. Okay, they may have spent another couple of years before that, even getting in the door. And that is the patience of a hacktivist. This is something, because this isn't our job. This isn't something where we've got a boss sitting over our heads, tapping his foot going, hey, you got to get this done. You got to get this done. This is people who are working on their own time with their own agendas. Okay. And they can have the patience of a fucking saint, because there's nothing to win or lose. If they don't get in, they don't get in. Nobody's going to yell at them. Nobody's going to know the difference. And if they do get in, then they've got their victory. They're in. So people that are listening to the U.S. government on these large hacks, they need to understand better the hacktivist culture, the black hat culture, and understand how pervasive it is. How many of us there are around the world who, dabble or do this full time. It doesn't matter, because you can dabble. You can be a part-time hacktivist where you just spend a few hours a day poking around to see what you can get into, and you're the one who wins the lottery. You're the one who gets fucking lucky and gets his foot in the door, and then you go like screaming in IRC or to a bunch of your buddies, hey guys, look what I fucking found. Jesus Christ, I'm in here now, and it doesn't have to be the dude that spent years and years trying to get in. It can be some dude who just that night just decided to fiddle around, and he just won the lottery, and he got lucky and he got in. That is the nature of complex, ever exponentially complex systems. And so I agree with Mark, and I agree that people need to have a whole different perspective about this, and it is to your benefit, because your government now is going to do things in your name based on this false assumption. It's the same way that they based their false assumption that Russia was responsible for getting Donald Trump elected. Nothing could be further from the truth. Information was responsible for getting Donald Trump elected. Information that showed that Hillary Clinton was laughing at all of you, that she was fucking rigging the election, that she was fucking denigrating Bernie Sanders, that she was literally fucking making jokes about baristas. How many baristas voted for fucking Dems, right? I mean, probably all of them, right? I mean, and she was literally denigrating hardworking fucking baristas, who I actually took personal offense to that, because some of my best friends in the world, if you read my book, my books were written in coffee houses. All of my hacks were done in coffee houses. Baristas are literally some of my best friends in the world. That was really super fucking insulting to denigrate them. And people make light of that. They make joke, oh, so what? So what? Hillary made fun of baristas. Big deal. Well, it is a fucking big deal. These people are trying to be your heroes. They're trying to get elected. They are trying to get power from you and your vote. If they're out there fucking talking shit about you behind your back, you have a right to know. And that's exactly what was shown in this election. Information lost that election for Hillary Clinton. Nothing more, nothing less.
Okay.
I'm doing like 8 things at once right now.
Yeah, no, but I mean, we've all been dealing with that. We got approached a lot. I mean, even in a Million Mask March server there were people showing up and saying like, yeah, why do some of you guys affiliate with with Anonymous, and because you have $1 million minds, right? And they were attempting like directly to recruit people, and you just answer like, yeah, for some people, the things you actually believe in, that you give your life for, is far more important than money. You're not going to like drop your beliefs for a little job. I mean,
this is why hacktivism will always be more powerful than state-sponsored hacking, because people, it's just a matter of common sense. It's a matter of human nature. People who do something for a belief system, a worldview, and just look at an example of these crazy pro-Trumpers, okay? They do what they do because of a worldview, because of a belief system that they believe in, okay? A worldview, a belief system will always drive somebody more than a paycheck. And then you couple on top of the fact that these paychecks suck to begin with. Government jobs never pay what you could be in the private sector. People who want money are never going to work for the government. Even if you have no politics and you don't care about shit but yourself, you're not going to go to work for the government if you've got the brightest mind. You're going to go to work for Apple or Google or one of these other big companies. So the government can never win, because on both sides, whether it's for greed or whether it's the people fighting for what they believe in, they will never be able to attract to themselves the same minds. Why do you think somebody like the Air Force, the new cyber force that they invented under the branch of the Air Force, that cyber force, why do you think it takes 6,000 hackers in Washington, D.C. at the cyber force headquarters to even begin? And yet six hackers can bring down the Israeli government, or bring the Israeli army to a stop. Look at the exponential difference. And it tells you all you need to know about what's going on. So when you see these brilliant hacks like SolarWinds, and by the way, guys, I've studied the SolarWinds hack. It really wasn't all that. The only thing that makes the SolarWinds hack so dramatic is they were in that system for so fucking long. They were able to go lateral, what we call going lateral, within those systems for so fucking long undetected. That's the only thing that makes this hack really that great. I have studied how they got in. It really wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't some big fucking high-tech wizardly fucking hack like Mr. Robot. They got in the same way we get into most of these systems, the standard ways that any schlep-ass fucking hacktivist would use to get into a system. They just had a long time to be in those systems, and were able to infiltrate and exfiltrate huge amounts of data that we really still, I don't think we'll ever have a clue about how much data they were able to exfiltrate. So the myth around all of this is just one of the most aggravating things to me is this idea, and people believe it. Mainstream Americans will buy into this shit and believe that these governments are attacking them. And now that's not to say that governments don't. China, for instance, has a big interest in intellectual property, and much of the intellectual property, the diagrams of how products are made and stuff like that. I remember, for instance, years ago, China hacked a Xerox company, and the only thing they wanted was the timing mechanism that makes a printer work. And this timing mechanism can also be used to ignite nuclear weapons, because when you have a nuclear weapon, you have to have multiple explosions, conventional explosions around the core that go off simultaneously. And they didn't know how to do this. They didn't know. It has to be within like a very short amount of time. And they discovered that the tiny little chip, a tiny little component in Xerox printing machines had the timing, the sophisticated enough timing to be able to do this, and they hacked Xerox to get the diagram of how to make this fucking component. Those kinds of hacks are obvious. That kind of intellectual property theft is something that China is famous for, and I'm quite certain that the average hacktivist in China isn't out there doing a lot of that shit, because they don't really care about that. They're doing political hacks and stuff like that. So those are ones that you can definitely say, this one looks like it's state attributed. This is state hackers. But to go and say that all of these big hacks blanketly are done by state hackers is it's just ridiculous, and it's making America more in danger, more insecure, because people believe this shit. Even the white hats believe the government. They believe this shit, and so everybody's going to be looking in the wrong direction. And it's long been my contention that a big one is coming, guys. A big one. Somebody's going to turn the whole fucking electrical grid off in the United States of America someday. And imagine the damage that I would do. Imagine how many, if you think 5 people dead at the Capitol is a big deal, imagine if the lights went out coast to coast in the United States and stayed out for like days. There would be so many deaths, it would be uncountable. Okay, the rioting, the fucking looting, it would be unbelievable, fuckingly catastrophic. And I can tell you for a fact, it is unbelievably easy to do. And there is no state in the world that's going to dare to put their fingerprints on something like that. When it happens, it's going to be a hacktivist. It's going to be some fucking crazy maniac in Ukraine or fucking Russia or somewhere else that has an axe to grind politically against the West, gets his finger on the trigger, figures out how to do it, and the maniac is just going to be like, fuck it, let's do it. Okay, no state would ever put their fingers on something like that. So when the big one comes, it's going to come from people who are motivated by politics and worldview, not by money and not by a government job. And so by looking in all these by trying to find ghosts in the Russian intelligence service that are doing this, it's disingenuous and it's fucking dangerous, and it puts America, both individual Americans and the country as a whole, in danger to believe this sort of nonsense.
Yeah, and we're also dealing with corporations, but mostly state entities. They seem to make very basic security mistakes, and these are so obvious that you can even just mention them. Like when they have, for example, when they have job offers, they have their job offers online, right? And it tells you exactly what they require of you. You need expertise with this operating system, expertise with this hardware, right? So you're giving out everything.
Fantastic point, Louvers.
Into the public. Yeah, you don't have to do that. You just keep that a little bit on the down low, right? Because you're also giving it to you're giving it to hacktivists, you're giving it to whatever foreign states, I don't know, but you're giving it to everyone, right? And these are just simple things, and so other things you can if you're someone with a lot of skills and you have really the desire to change something, you can always apply for a job too, right? I mean, it's that simple. So, and I think for the rest, X, what he said is correct. And I did have a question for him. Someone asked it, and that is, someone asked in the chat, do you know who hacked John Podesta's emails called Belgrade Dominion hackers hack machines in this election, X?
Repeat the question a little slower, please.
The question was, do you know who hacked Podesta's emails? And then the follow-up is, could Belgrade Dominion hackers have done that in this election?
Yeah.
I wrote quite extensively on the election hacks that took place in 2016. And I even had the privilege, I guess you will, of speaking to one of the hackers who was in part responsible for the DNC hack.
So I'm gonna interject here for a minute, real quick, because all available, I don't know, intel suggests that the DNC servers was a direct download and did not take place in hack form. Like veteran intelligence professionals for Sanity, Ray McGovern and Benny and those guys, they took a look at it. A guy called the Forensicator took a look at it. There was no exfiltration of data. Like the fucking CEO of CrowdStrike had to fucking testify to that in court. They kept it buried for 3 years. It only came out because that was leaked. Those transcripts were leaked. But there was no hack that took place of the DNC server's direct download, Craig Murray carried a thumb drive to Julian on that.
I don't believe that part. I will tell you, I disagree with that part. Both hacks, and I feel fairly confident about this because I stated it publicly, and Julian made a point of retweeting at the time from WikiLeaks' Twitter account my discounting of that theory. I believe that both.
Yeah, I believe that. Why wouldn't you?
Both hacks ended up in the Dropbox. The Podesta emails and the DNC material both ended up in Julian's Dropbox. Julian was no more involved in any of that than he just opened up the box one morning and there that shit was. And I have run a leak site myself. I am the founder of a leak site that is still on the web today called Local Leaks, which is Julian actually approved of and publicly not authorized, if you will, but sort of agreed with us starting Local Leaks back in 2010, actually. It's been around a long time, and it's still functioning. I handed off that to some hacktivists that I believe are responsible enough to handle a leak site. And I can tell you that having run a leak site of my own, one of the most exciting things is opening up that Dropbox every morning just to see what the fuck is in there. That's the best part of the job. You know what I mean? Is opening it up to see who put what in there. And that's my understanding of how they made it to WikiLeaks. As far as the DNC thing goes, and even the Podesta, I will speak first to the DNC hack. It's my belief that the chain of events went something like this. I firmly believe, and I'm not going to name the person because there's so much controversy with this and there's so much harm done to his family so far by naming his name. I would prefer not to speak of this person by name, but it is my understanding that the credentials for the DNC email system were delivered directly to a group of hackers. And it was done through an intermediary. And again, I'm not going to name who that intermediary is because he's very, very famous. He's also very wealthy. I'll leave it to others to assume who I might be talking about. But there was a chain of custody of the admins, the password, and the username that would get people into that system. And it eventually, through a third-party medium in the West, made its way to a group of hackers. They were a multinational group. They had Ukrainian hackers, Bulgarian hackers, Romanian hackers, and Russian hackers. And that made it to them. And they then, in turn, broke into the system without much effort at all because obviously the door was opened for them by a DNC employee. And there was a download of that system. The other person that I spoke to when I did my investigative article and published it on my blog, and also you can read that article in my book, Dark Ops. I reprinted it. The other person I spoke to was a friend of mine who worked for CrowdStrike. And he came to me one day very, very upset. He demanded a lot of encryption and protection in order to speak with me, but he wanted somebody to know. He wanted me to know. I was his choice to let somebody know what he saw. And he saw CrowdStrike manipulate those machines that the hack took place on. Keep bearing in mind that the FBI has never been allowed to examine those machines. CrowdStrike is the only one who ever examined them and the only word we have. And when he spoke up in a meeting, an exclusive meeting with the CrowdStrike people that were on the ground and in the DNC headquarters, when he spoke up against that manipulation, security people circled the desk and the table, lifted him up by the armpits, removed all of his electronic gear from him, his phone, his computer, everything, and escorted him from the building. He was terminated on the spot. Now, it is impossible for me to believe anything about those machines at this point. knowing what I know, and you only have my word for this, and I only have my friend's word for it. I can tell you he was a good friend, and for many, many years, he was, I don't want to say he was a mole in the system because he's a white hat, and he would never do that. He would never compromise his clients or compromise his work, but he was certainly the most sympathetic white hat that I have ever known to the cause and the movement. And I got a lot of tips from him over the years, a lot of things, a lot of little nuggets that he snuck me that were beneficial to the movement as a whole. I have no reason to believe this person would have lied to me or made up a story. He was genuinely upset. I want to say he was almost in tears over what he was telling me. And to my knowledge, I'm the only human being he ever confided in about this.
It's a private conversation I'd love to have someday. It is, because all of the I'm gonna say evidence suggests a direct download, and so much of the history and so many of the people involved, so many of whom are no longer with us.
It wasn't just downloaded once, because
there's multiple downloads.
Because hackers are very, what do I want to say? Hackers are very loose in some ways, okay? I guarantee you, even though I don't have any direct evidence or testimony to me, I guarantee you, just knowing the group, and I interviewed one person in this group who got those admins, okay? I guarantee you they shared that shit with fucking a bunch of people, okay? I think at least 3 times, at least 3 separate groups over the course of a couple of months had access to those machines and potentially downloaded material from those email servers. It wasn't just one download, okay? And this is why when you see this material pop up from multiple sources, people have tried to say, well, how did this group here in DC get to leak it? And then WikiLeaks leaked it. And then this other publication got it. And what was going on there? Well, it's because multiple people and multiple groups had access to this material. And here's an interesting thing. The original group that I talked to, who I think might have been the first ones in the door, the first ones to get their hands on this stuff, when they tried to go to WikiLeaks, they were rebuffed. And the reason was they didn't speak good enough English to explain to them what they had. They had to go to another group deeper in Russia, an actual Russian hacktivist group, who just by their nature of the group had good English skills. They had some people in that group that had good English skills. And I talk about this in my book. All these details are in my book. You can read about all of this.
Yeah, no, I know.
You get what I'm talking about. And they went to them, and that second group approached WikiLeaks and said, wait a minute, you guys really got to take a look at this shit that we got. And that is when Julian began to take the leak seriously and began the process that I know WikiLeaks goes through of validating that this is legitimate material. There are technical ways to take an email spool that you download and validate that it's a real spool and that it hasn't been cobbled together or
and
so it took a while.
It's fascinating because none of it fucking lines up.
And meanwhile, they got frustrated. This group got frustrated and went to other people as well with this material, which is why this material popped up over the course of weeks in many different locations. It's because you had multiple groups that in likelihood had access to it, and you also had multiple attempts to get it to the public because WikiLeaks, you know, to their credit, I mean, Glenn Greenwald is guilty of the same thing. Snowden had to contact him several times before Glenn would take Snowden seriously. This happens in the leak business. I think it's a lesson that Julian learned his lesson about it. I think he now, you know, looks at everything right away and tries to validate it. But it was a tendency on the part of certain people to, you know, you get so much garbage. I know myself, I got tons of garbage in the LocalLeaks Dropbox when we had that site going. Still going, by the way. LocalLeaks, you can follow them on Twitter. I got tons of garbage And there would be like, for every 100 pieces of shit that got dropped in there, I would have one nugget that was the real deal and that was earth-shattering and important. So as for the Podesta emails, that was one of the simplest hacks in the world. My understanding, and again, I don't have any direct testimony or evidence on the Podesta hack, but my understanding and my analysis of that hack from my own investigation is it was not even a hack. The dude had a shitty password.
No, it was a fucking phishing email, and his password was password.
And they just walked right in. They just walked right in the door.
Yeah, we know
which means it could have been anybody, any script kiddie in probably in Eastern Europe. I think that all of these hacks probably originated from people with, again, hacktivists and hackers with Russian agenda, no doubt. Okay, but understand that Russian hacktivists believe with all their heart and soul, they believe that they have a very legitimate cause here. They see Russia as being encircled by NATO bases, which we know they are. They see Russia as being constantly denigrated as a third world democracy, which it's not. It has had some of the most monitored and some of the most legitimate elections in the world have been held in recent decades in Russia. Okay, and so what they see. And do they have problems with human rights? Of course, but they don't have black people being slaughtered in the streets by white cops either. So, there's the hacktivists that work in Russia and in the Eastern European sphere are just hacktivists just like us. And they are doing what they are doing, and they are targeting the West out of very heartfelt, very deep felt, and to be honest with you, somewhat legitimate worldviews and political views. They are no more or less dedicated than Western hacktivists who attack countries like China over the Tibet issue, or attack countries like we originally did Venezuela. I can remember back in the day when Maduro wasn't a fucking darling of the goddamn left. He was the fucking enemy of Anonymous. We were hacking that cunt because he was locking everybody up in prison and killing people. So, just as hacktivists in the West can have very heartfelt, very deep felt things and attack these nation states to great effect, so can the hacktivists in the Russian sphere and the Chinese sphere and anywhere else where there are American grievances going on and these hacktivists develop. Hacktivism is something that has spread around the globe into every niche and every corner. There are such specialized groups that there are groups you would never even hear of, hacktivists in Kyrgyzstan, for instance, who have their own little grievances against Russia and against this and that, and they're doing their little thing, and they'll never see the light of day. People will never talk about hacktivists in Kyrgyzstan, but they are there. You know what I mean? And people like me who try to stay very in touch with and aware of these movements realize that there's just millions and millions and millions. And it is the technique, it is the idea that information can trump anything, that you can literally change the world around you, that you can stop armies with information. This is the basic idea of hacktivism, and that is exportable to anyone, anywhere, and everybody is doing it.
I'm not debating that at all. Josh, maybe you could help out a little bit, at least on the Benny perspective of this, in terms of the DNC emails.
I mean, the stuff that Benny, that Vips, their analysis, what they were looking like, they were looking at, you could tell it was FAT file format because it had the headers and shit for it, and the dates were so fast, like they couldn't get the data quick enough for it to be a hack. That's my understanding of it. But X does bring up a point. I mean, how many times was this thing copied? Could it have been downloaded over a number of months or whatever, and then copied? I mean, that might account for that. I don't know. So it's a little up in the air.
No, I can speak to one hack I was directly involved in, and it's actually to my shame because it was also involved hacktivists that ended up becoming snitches. But that doesn't mean that they were necessarily the masterminds of this hack or whatever, but the stealing of Bashar Assad and his wife's emails. And that spool was in excess of 80,000 messages. And we brought that down in 4 hours. Now, I'm not saying it was easy to bring that much data down in 4 hours, but there are methods and there are ways to bring that amount of data down very, very quickly. So while I do not denigrate anybody else's analysis, and I certainly don't want to get into arguing my knowledge against anybody else's forensic analysis, my opinion about those forensic work that has been done by really good people on our side, okay, that I'm not denigrating, has always been that, you know, the old Buddhist story about how you have 4 blind men and they're all examining an elephant, and one of them holds the tail and says it's a snake, and one of them holds the leg and touches the leg and says it's a tree, and then another one touches the trunk and says no, it's. So that's what I think, to a great extent, you have something that was already pretty complex to begin with, and you have a bunch of good people looking at the elephant, but only seeing one part of it and not the greater picture. And I've always felt that my analysis, and WikiLeaks, I mind you, WikiLeaks felt the same. My analysis was unique because instead of looking at the forensics, what I delved into was the culture of hackers in general. I got busy and I dove into the darkest corners of hacker IRCs and whatnot. I looked for the hackers that did this. I talked to at least one of them. Like I said, I was leaked a piece of information from a white hat, and I put all of that together along with what I see as the culture of black hat activism, trying to square that with what happened. And that was how I performed my analysis of it. So I'm not denigrating anybody else's analysis. I'm not going to argue this forensic against that forensic. I had very little forensics to go on. What I went on was testimony and my own knowledge. For instance, I'll give you an example. One of the biggest cultural things that you can show that this was not state sanctioned is the way that Russia does.
Nobody's arguing it's state sanctioned.
Russia does their intelligence in a very specific way. There are 2 schools in the world, basically, of how to do intelligence. One of them is the Nazi way, which through Operation Paperclip was then imported into the CIA and the NSA. So you can call it the Nazi school, if you will, of how to do intel, okay? And we, again, I say we have this imported now into the CIA and the NSA. And then you have the Russian school of intelligence, which operates in a very, very different fashion. The Russian intelligence operates by hoarding absolutely insane amounts of very, very trivial, some would say almost pointless data, and hoarding it in top secret vaults for decades.
Yeah, that's what the NSA server farms are now.
On the chance that they will be able to farm one tiny little detail about some dude who eventually gains power and be able to control him with, it's called kompromat in Russian, kompromat, okay? And so this could never have been a state-sanctioned hack. If the Russians had gotten a hold of the DNC spool or the Podesta spool, there's absolutely no fucking way that they would have made that spool public. They would have buried that in their deepest, darkest, most top secret fucking vault and simply sat back and waited like this, going, oh, I can't wait until one of these cunts gets in power.
The only people that are arguing that it was a state-sanctioned hack are the people that are primarily responsible for the torture, arbitrary detention, and current imprisonment of Julian Assange.
Yeah.
Like, I want to make that perfectly clear. Like, nobody here is trying to say it was a state-sanctioned hack. But what I've been shown, the conversations that I have had have led me to believe that it was a leak and not a hack, especially with the wake of bodies that have been left.
It was both.
By everyone remotely connected to this.
And by hack, you have to use a very loose term of hack because, like I said, I think that in both cases, the door was essentially left open. There was no sophisticated techniques used. There was
nobody's arguing that
there was no command line network hacking.
That's not
none of that sort of sophisticated stuff.
Yeah, no, it's not a position
these
that
were
anyone
trivial.
is taking.
These were trivial hacks. And again, that is another telltale sign of hacktivism. Who does this modus operandi fit? It fits hacktivism in all its extents. I mean, hack and dump is literally a brand name of Anonymous. I mean, look at the Sarah Palin emails. Look at the Stratford hack. It has always been hack and dump, hack and dump, hack and dump, and that's what these were. These were hack and dumps, and they were unsophisticated hacks that didn't take a rocket scientist to do it. Any hacktivist group could have done it, and it's my belief that several did. So, at least in the case of the DNC, I believe that up to 3 groups may have had access before anybody detected those hacks. And then as far as the forensic stuff goes, I don't think we can ever make a judgment on the forensics because those machines were tampered with. I believe that with all my heart and soul, based on the testimony of somebody I trust. Those machines were absolutely modified. And even then, they were modified to hide evidence and to produce false evidence for the FBI, and they still never turned them over to the FBI.
No, they got one redacted report. What we do have is the backstory and the reality of who Sean Henry is. So let's maybe do that for a minute, and anyone who wants to jump in on this as well is more than welcome to. But Sean Henry is the current CEO of CrowdStrike. Now, where did Sean Henry come from, and what kind of experience would he have to allow him to be the chief executive officer of an organization like CrowdStrike? He was an FBI handler, and he was one of only 2 possible FBI agents that could have been the handler for Sabu. And his reward for flipping and handling Sabu was, hey, now you get to run this corporation. When they put him under oath in either the House or the Senate Intelligence Committee, and they asked him about the hack of the DNC servers, not Podesta's email, but the DNC servers. He said, under oath, no, we don't have any actual evidence that any sort of a hack took place. No, we don't. And they made him reiterate it. And then Adam Schiff tried to save him. And the only reason that we know this nearly 4 years after the fact is because those transcripts were themselves leaked. And I don't know, dude. There's so much other shit that I want to talk about, man. Like this is absolutely fascinating, and I would love to at some point in my life, like privately, have a conversation with the individual that you did. But it's so fundamentally key to understand what really happened, because it unlocks everything surrounding Julian's impending fucking death sentence if we don't get him the fuck out of Belmarsh.
These people,
you know what I mean?
that I talk about, and this one individual that I spoke to, these were not sophisticated individuals with sophisticated agendas. The thing to understand is there's no mystery here. There was no deep, dark conspiracy within even Russian hacktivism to do this. These are guys who in Russia, by the way, the hacktivist culture, you need to understand, is very different in very different places. A lot of these hacktivists in Russia steal credit cards by day. They're full on black hats, the ones that cause you all the problems when your credit card gets fucking borked and you have to go undo a million different charges. These guys are criminals by day, and in Russian hacktivism, that is not frowned upon the way it is in Western hacktivism. In Western hacktivism, you very much have a dichotomy between the black hats who do crime and the hacktivists who solely, exclusively dedicate themselves to political hacking. In Russian hacktivism, they don't have that sort of economic. They don't have that luxury. Okay, so a lot of them, they earn their money that they can pay the rent with and everything, so they can be hacktivists. They earn that money through very nefarious means. They are people who a lot of even hacktivists in the West would not really want to associate with. And it takes a cultural understanding and a cultural sympathy with these folks to be able to gain their trust and to be able to associate with them the way I have over the years. You just have to simply understand that things don't always work, even within transgressive hacktivism, don't always work the way they work here in the West. So these people did not, I'm not saying they weren't sophisticated individuals, I'm not saying anything bad about them, but they certainly didn't have any sort of sophisticated agenda or anything. They were fishing around the US election to try to fuck with America because they have a beef with America. And it really is no more complicated or sophisticated than that. And and to a great extent, they got lucky. Which is how a lot of political hacks and even criminal hacks take place. That the hacker just gets lucky, and in their case, they did. So, I mean, a conversation with them might be fascinating, but I don't know that you'd learn any more than what I've revealed in my book about them or their motivations or anything. It really is that simple.
I'd say it would be for my own edification because there's so much that on this like one particular thing that just it flies in the face of everything that I've already been exposed to from sources that I trust as much as I can trust somebody. And so no, I mean, and I really, dude, I don't want to like get stuck on this. I would like to move on. We've been going for about 2 hours and 37 minutes, and I'd like to curb this in the next 20 or so because we do have another show coming up later today. Maybe the next, like, I don't know, dude, we'll go till we don't, but I don't want to just get stuck in a rut here. And I think that this certainly bears further exploration. I'm fucking fascinated by it.
Well, now might be a good time then to shoot those links I sent you, Steve, on my books.
They're already in the chat. They've been in the chat and they're in the show notes.
Good. Because again, this isn't about selling books, guys. Anybody who's broke out there, reach out to the Friends of X committee and ask them, and we'll make sure you get a copy of those books. I have never begrudged anybody to read the books. It's not about the money, but there's a lot of truth in those books. And I would point out that the people who made the movie about me and based it on those books spent many, many thousands of dollars to fact check the stories in those books, which by my own admission are rather incredible. But they fact checked them, and they've been fact checked by professionals. So that shit is truth in there with a capital T in those books. And if you want a whole different perspective on a lot of this stuff, from the nature of hacktivism to the nature of election hacking, I encourage you to read my books. They may be the last I ever publish. So give them a read.
And you have a book that didn't get that you pulled back from publishing, and what's gonna happen to that? Do you know?
around about the time that my illness took a turn for the worst, it's a rather mundane answer, really, as far as that book goes. But during that period of time, and probably because I was not in a very good mental state at that time, and we're talking the period of, I guess, when was it? When I walked off the stage this summer, I guess.
I can tell you exactly when it was because you were. We had an interview the day before.
Yeah, and but that period of time, and my physical illness took a turn for the worse. My mental state was about as bad as you get, and simultaneous to that, by coincidence, I ran into a problem, and I please do not fuel the fucking conspiracies, guys. It was not a hack. I was not hacked. Okay. It was my own stupid, again, I was in a very bad mental state. I was not myself, about as far from it as you can get. And I had a series of things go wrong with my computer setup. They were all my fault. Again, no conspiracy theories, not a hack, just me being an idiot because I was very ill and I was not thinking. I flailed around for a number of hours, almost a whole day, trying to set things to right. And during the final phase of the destruction of literally every bit of data that I owned on every drive, I was literally online with my media agent, who I mentioned before, Ian Thornton. I was literally online, and as I showed him a picture of the countdown going down, and I was like, that's all my data going down the drain, dude. That's everything, every bit of writing I've ever written, all of it. And it was not, again, I please emphasize, not any great conspiracy, not any great thing. It was a series of mistakes on my part with my computer and a flailing attempt to set things to right. And literally, all of my data went down the drain. And what occurred was that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I was already deep in the depths of mental illness. I can admit that because I'm a big believer in being honest about mental illness, being transparent and upfront about it. It's a terrible thing. It's a hard thing. It's a very difficult thing. I was deep in the throes of severe mental illness, severe, guys, very, very bad, and physical illness, which I still am. The mental illness is maybe abated a little bit, but the physical illness that I suffered from is really no better. In fact, in many ways, I'm worse than I was at that time. And then combined with the loss of literally every byte of data that I had in my possession was lost in this calamity. It was just a simple computer calamity based on a series, cascading series of mistakes that I made. Nobody else did this to me. I made these mistakes, and I was unable, as try as I might with all of my expertise, unable to fix them. And as a consequence of that, with regard to your specific question on the book on the FBI, the entire draft of that book, which was almost finished, was lost. Completely lost, irrevocably lost by my own hand, by my own mistakes. And I have been honest since I made my announcement that I was walking off the stage. I don't have the strength, guys, to recreate something like that. I just don't. I don't have the strength to go on. And I don't have the strength to recreate a lot of this work that I was working on. That was one big project, but there were others. There were several books that went down the drain that day. And that they cannot see the light of day in the current health state that I'm in. I was very honest when I released my final statement and walked off the stage. I'm dying, guys. That's the bottom line, and it's not going to be very long. I mean, I actually am in a space right now where I hope it's not very long because the suffering is pretty great. I mean, I do what I can with what medicines I can get my hands on to mitigate that, but it is a very difficult time for me. And what I discovered is in facing that and in coming to grips with that is that there are things that a man has to reckon with that go beyond the considerations of politics and activism and freedom fighting. And that's the space that I'm in now, is essentially reckoning with the end of my life. And that's a heavy process. I have a lot to reckon. I have a lot to answer for. You know, not everything I've done in my life I'm proud of. In fact, there's a whole lot of shit. And even to do with hacktivism and activism, there's a lot of stuff that I regret. There's a lot of things that I wish I'd have done differently. There's a lot of people that I put in harm's way, and I did it knowingly. Okay, I thought it was the right thing at the time, but I did it knowingly. And this is just one aspect of the reckoning that comes with this. Now, there's this group of people here in Mexico that have intervened in this process, and we call them the Friends of X Committee. And other than Natalia and Stephanie, who I've named, they remain anonymous for their own protection, for their own comfort and safety. And they have intervened in this process, and they are of the firm belief and the firm resolve to try to save my life. I'm not in any way convinced they can, but they are trying very hard, and they are raising funds to that end online. I gave the link to Steve to shoot it.
Just dropped it in the chat again, X.
For their sake, not for my own, because at this point I've resolved myself to the inevitable. And I'm not sad about it, guys. I have lived a life, let me tell you something, I have lived a life that's right out of a Tom Clancy book. When I left home at the age of 14 and began my great battle against everything that I felt was wrong in the world, I had one prayer, and I'm an atheist, I might add, but I shot a Hail Mary, and I had only one prayer to any God that might exist. I was like, just please don't let it be boring. And I got to tell you something, guys. I got my prayer. Watch what you ask for. Watch what the fuck you ask for. Because every day of my life since then has been surreal. Surreal in the extreme. I have lived a full and good life, and I have made a difference in this world that so few people have the chance to be able to make an impact on human history, make an impact on our culture and our world, and be able to see that impact, that indelible impact in their own lifetimes. And I am one of those blessed individuals. So there is no regrets as far as what I feel is the impending end. But I'm telling this only so that people like Mark, especially, who I was very close to and working very closely with at the end, and Steve, who I gave, I guess, my last interview prior to this one, when I released the statement that I did, laying all these things out, I'm not trying to confabulate. I'm not trying to make people unduly worried. I'm trying to be honest, because so many of my heroes left this mortal coil and left us all saying, why didn't we know? Why didn't they tell us? Why didn't they? How did this happen? And so I want to be open about what I feel is the end for me. And I want people to know it's coming, so that people will be able to get what they need from me, like this interview, and be able to be nobody will be able to say and have regret that they didn't know. And that's important to me, because I lost some really great heroes, people who helped form who I am, with no telltale sign even that it was coming. And what I want for people is the opposite of that. I want people to know that I feel with all my heart and soul that this is the end for me. So this very well might be the last interview I ever give. And I appreciate the chance to be here with Steve and Glory and Pasta and Mark, who's a dear friend of mine. I worked with Mark for years and years and years to help change the world. Again, I'm an atheist. I don't pray per se, but I hope that any spirit of my own, any spirit of what I've done will be with Mark forever and ever. He's one of the greatest freedom fighters I've ever had the honor of doing battle with Empire with. So, and one thing about Mark is that he has integrity and he has honor. In fact, at times he was my moral compass. Yeah. If you want to help Natalia and them out, I feel strongly they deserve the help because they really feel strongly to not let this happen. Again, I don't believe they can stop it, but they want to try. And I think if you would like to give them the chance, they need your help.
I've had a lot of backstage conversations with Nat.
Actually, sorry, guys.
Had a lot of backstage conversations with Nat, and you had us downright concerned. I found the date too, by the way. You fucking you pulled the vanishing act on let me get this right. I'm gonna say June 22nd of this year, and at that point, well, I guess it was a few weeks down the road when we hadn't heard from you in a little bit. You didn't pop back up. That's when Nat and I decided to get involved. And I gotta say, man, there's not a whole lot I can do from where I am, but I am so fucking grateful for Nat, for Stephanie, and for Nat's family, and for what they've been able to do, because my friend, you're getting what I want, okay, or the equivalent of what I want, and all I want is to be able to like fish on my own property. Like that's all I want, and everything that
I think a couple of things. The mental illness back then necessitated an immediate removal. I was to the point where I was to the point where I literally could not trust myself or my own judgment or even my own senses. And that's how bad the mental illness got. That is the one thing that has improved through Nat and Stephanie and other people, Steve, yourself, intervention is the mental illness. At least now I am, most of the time, I can't say it's complete, but most of the time I am at least lucid and trust my own senses. And that necessitated an immediate removal. As I said in the statement, I have far too much influence and power in this world to allow myself to be in the world with that level of mental illness. I simply couldn't trust myself. I think that was the basic thing. And the other thing I want to reiterate, I'm very grateful to see the bullet coming, guys. There are so many people, and for years I thought that it would literally be a bullet that would take me. I really thought that, especially during the peak years when I was getting death threats, like literally every hour, credible death threats, I really felt like for a long time the end would come very suddenly and without warning. And that was always a great fear for me. But now I can see the bullet coming, and it's a huge relief to me to be able to, put my affairs in order, put my spirituality in order, especially heavy emphasis on spirituality, and to be able to have that opportunity to see the bullet coming is one of the things. Besides the full life that I've led, is one of the things I'm most grateful for. So I encourage people, don't be sad about this. And if you feel so very strongly, then the only thing I can encourage you to do is to help out Natalie and Stephanie and the rest of them who are so adamantly opposed to this and really want to intervene and help, because there's nothing you can do for me. Nothing. There's nothing anybody can do for me. I can only do for myself at this point. But they are the one thing that is potentially intervening in this process. And so I would encourage you to support them. And that's all I can say, because they work very, very hard, and they take a lot of resources out of their own, every bit of resource they possibly can out of their own life. And they're giving literally all they can every moment of every day. Literally, I can make a call and they will come running 2 hours to where they have stashed me. Night or day, they will drive here and come for any reason. And so they're giving all they can, and they can only go further. They can only take this further with your help. So, yeah. Enough about me. Ask some other questions, guys.
Lubers, you got anything? Sleepy Josh?
Yeah,
I was just
I'm a
carefully
mess,
listening.
dude.
Sorry, Josh. No, I was just listening to what you all had to say. I mean, and I'm reading the chat. I mean, there's so many people giving comments about it.
You got a lot of love in the chat, X, and there's a lot of people here that support you. And I've had to post the links to the books like 80 fucking times. And look, man,
Look, everybody out there, smile. First of all, give yourself a hug. And again, the only advice I'll give you is to do what I have done. Live every day of your life like it's your last. And when you finally reach the last, you will be so happy with the result. Because my whole life philosophy can be summed up in that simple thing. I lived every single day, every moment of every day, as if I wasn't going to get another. And because of that, I have this huge stockpile of the most incredible experiences any human being could ever ask for. So live without regret. That's the key thing, is to just live your life to the fullest and live without regret. And absolutely, please don't feel bad for me. I have done that, and I'm very, very pleased with the result. So.
Hey, someone is asking, what do you want to see most? What would make the difference for you?
Well, again, and it sucks to dwell on this, I guess, but I'll answer the question. Again, I know my own body. I know the things that are wrong with me, and I'm not willing to discuss them publicly, but I know what's wrong with me, and I know my own body, and I honestly don't believe there's anything that can reverse what's happening to me. But the only possible thing that could turn it around, and I have volunteered to submit myself to that process with Natalie and at the head of it, would be to be hospitalized. I would need to submit myself to the doctors, a lot like when I turned myself into the immigration authorities here to get political asylum. It's basically, I almost see it like that. I would need to turn myself into the medical people. I would need to undergo at least 2, if not 3, pretty serious surgeries. And I'm not willing, I am willing, and I've agreed with Natalie in private to submit myself to that process. What I'm unwilling to do is to submit myself part way to that process. And let me explain what I mean by that. I don't want to get halfway through this thing and not be able to follow through and finish, because it will leave me in more agony and more pain than I already am in. And I'm in considerable discomfort right now, considerable, full-time permanent discomfort. My concern for this plan that Natalie has of sort of full-blown medical assault on my conditions is that we will get partway through the process, not be able to finish. I will still have the same result. but I will be in much more discomfort and pain than I am now. So what needs to happen for Natalie to fulfill her plan and for me to agree to submit to it is we need to raise several thousand US dollars very quickly, all at once. What's happening now is very heartwarming. People are donating, people are giving to Natalie's fundraiser, but they're only giving fast enough to provide basics like food and palliative medicines that can help a little bit with the discomfort. And I'm very grateful for that. I don't want to denigrate that, but I want to be honest and say that that's not going to be enough to save my life. And it's not going to be enough to get me to agree to Natalie's plan. And she's been very adamant. We've had some arguments, we've had some disagreements over this, but I really need to see, the funding in place for the entire process. And until I see that, I'm not willing to submit to it because, like I said, that my great fear is that it will leave me in more discomfort than I am now. And I'm not willing to do that, not even to save my life. So we need to raise, like I said, my guess, and it's just a rough estimate, several thousand USD in a short period of time, in a reasonable period of time, because otherwise that money goes to my support. You know, I need to eat and have medicines and stuff like that. And we've received donations, but and it's been enough for that, but it hasn't been enough to begin a process that, to be honest with you, even agreeing to it in principle is terrifying to me. I know what they're going to have to do to me even to try to save my life. And it's terrifying on so many visceral levels. But I am willing to submit to it. And my only requirement is that the funding be there in advance. This is Mexico and I'm not a citizen. I can't get universal health care like in Canada. I can't get insurance. I can't get anything. We are going to have to pay cash for every visit, every surgery, every prescription, everything along the route that might possibly lead to saving my life. And so that's where we stand. And if anybody, I only want to see that happen because Nat is so adamant about it. I have literally sat with her in tears over these discussions that we've had. And she is so emotionally vested in trying to make this happen. And so for her sake, if it can happen, I approve and I would like to see it happen. For my own sake, like I said, I've already resigned myself. I resigned myself when I wrote that letter to the world, and even a little bit before then. And I'm not asking anybody for anything at this point, but for her sake and for her plans, that's what it would take. To answer your question, that is what it would take.
Okay, I have one more thing, actually, real quick. I have a greetings for you from Dumala from Cyber Guerrilla. And he wants to say, comrades in arms forever until death.
Absolutely. Dumela, again, is one of those freedom fighters who, you know, and I don't want to quantify anybody into lists or anything like that, but he is one of the people I can count on one hand and not use all my fingers that I would put my life in unreservedly on the battle lines, on the cyber battlefronts, anywhere. Dumela is somebody I encourage when it comes to thinking of Commander X and the passing of the mantle or anything like that. However much you could trust me, you could trust Dumela in his judgment, in his honor, in his tactics, his strategy, his ability to affect change through this wonderful tool that we all discovered together a decade ago. This information activism, this hacktivism, freedom fighting with information, whatever you want to call it. Dumela is one of the best and one of the people that everybody should turn to as a mentor, as an icon. It's often been said that this movement doesn't have leaders, but I've always argued strongly against that. It's that everybody in this movement is a leader. Okay, everybody in this movement at least can be a leader. And I think that DeMiller is one of those people who I would encourage people to follow him wherever he goes and whatever he does, and to not be afraid. And he also has another ethic that is very, very important and critical that Mark also has, and that is to keep looking behind you. We can't forget the ones who are fallen. We have to make sure. I mean, our enemy has an ethic that they don't leave anybody behind on the battlefield. If they can have that ethic, then we have to be better than them. We have to have the moral high ground. And in order to do that, we have to always remember to look behind us and to bring our fallen comrades off the field of battle. You need to continue to support people like Martin Godsfield, Jeremy Hammond, Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, everybody, not just the big names. It's, I love Julian. He's a friend of mine. But don't get so enamored of a personality cult that you forget that there are so many other people who put their life and their freedom on the line, who right now are being persecuted under the boot heel of empire. They are just as important. My great fear on the Free Julian Assange movement is that he's going to get free, and then everybody's going to go back to their own little thing that they're doing, their own little cause that they were working on. And we've got to remember there are dozens of Julian Assanges out there, and they all need our help. And it's the ones that get talked about the least that need our help the most. So don't make a god out of Julian Assange. Yes, he's important. Yes, he's a dear man who has suffered so greatly. Okay, and we need to focus on him right now because he's the closest one to the front line. So you have to prioritize and you have to do triage. But let us not forget all of the Anons and all of the hacktivists and all of the information. And this isn't even just in the West, all across Latin America, all across Africa. Hacktivists are being imprisoned for blogging, for posting, for protesting online. And we can't leave any of these people behind if we're going to call ourselves a unitary movement. If we're going to say that we stand for the mask, if we're going to say that we stand for Anonymous, then we have to look out for all of those people. And it's been a great fear of mine that so many of these people are unsung and are not being paid attention to. I would encourage people at Free Anons, who have been one of the greatest points on this, to do more. I love what they've done. They have saved so many hacktivists, and they have really been there for people like Jeremy Hammond and others. But you can do more. You can build a movement around Free Anons. Every single hacktivist who goes down, whether it's in Nigeria or Chicago, should be accounted for. Their names should be on a website. Information and updates should be posted on every single one of them. People should be doing court support for every single one of these people, because they are unsung heroes. Martin Godsfield has taken so much shit from other Anons in the movement and from people around the world, but he was a hero who by his heroism, revealed systemic child abuse in the Boston pediatric Boston Children's Hospital. This is a big thing. These are children being abused in darkness, children being tortured and fucking terrified in darkness when even their own parents are being arrested for trying to help them. And he revealed that, and he's rotting in a controlled media unit. They call it a controlled media unit, which is essentially an anti-terrorist unit, a maximum security lockdown. And he's languishing in this condition. And there are people out there supporting him. His wife is the first and foremost among them. But instead of trying to criticize what he did, I think people need to step up and support people like that, who they are just as heroic as me, as Julian, as any of them, because they put it all on the line. You can only put it all on the line once, guys. All is all, okay? Julian put it all on the line. I give you that. But other people have too. And their contributions are important. They are critical, certainly to the children, the individual children that Marty was actually trying to save, including, not just all of them and put the systemic stuff out there, but there were individual kids that he was working with their families and stuff to reveal this shit. And I have never heard them complain about what Marty did. In fact, to this day, the one girl that he was working with the most is incredibly grateful that her case saw the light of day because of Marty's actions. And he's doing a long, hard fucking sentence, guys. And he's doing it the hard way because he became vocal even in prison. And so they put him in this communications management unit, the CMU, where he's at now. That's just one example, guys, of so many, not just in the US, but around the world. And so you need to look to leaders like Mark and Dumella who also understand this and understand it clearly, because I don't know how many times I've heard some of these unsung cases on Mark's show. He never hesitates to give the light of day to these cases, and he doesn't give a rat's ass what anybody else, even in the movement, says about it. He'll put it out there anyway. So in the future, you won't have me, but trust these people because I trusted them with my life, and I trust that they have the same ethics and the same morality and the same honor that I have. Anyway, hi, Dumella. That's my long. I hope that he's.
Yeah, he reached out he reached out in my DMs just to give you that greeting, and he is also concerned, obviously, with you. I mean, yeah.
Well, folks, it's been what, like 3 hours now. I gotta eat and I gotta do some shit before we have our afternoon show. I would love to have some closing thoughts from everyone on the panel. And we'll probably carry over this conversation backstage for a little bit. You guys are welcome to carry on the conversation at Slow News Days Discord. Holy shit, I did that. Did you see that? That never fucking happens, man. Never. I will try and find a way to drop an invite link into the chat.
Sorry, I got you.
Oh, me too. I'm look, Gloria, I'm on it too. I promise.
Good job, Steve. I'm so proud of you.
Boom, it's in the chat.
Yeah, stick around for a few minutes, guys, after the show, and we'll talk.
But again, I would love to get some closing thoughts from everyone. DJ Elf, thank you, man. I appreciate that, Ed. You're solid.
DJ.
You guys, if you don't know Ed, if you're not hip to DJ Elf for his show, you should definitely go check that out. Ed's fucking one of those like beautifully crazy motherfuckers that we need more of around in these uncertain times. Lubers, let's kick this off with you, my friend.
Yeah, I know, and I posted about this earlier today too, and that is like the importance of time, right? I mean, that's what this whole episode we've been talking about, a lot of things, and I think time, you have to realize how important time is and what you focus on and what you do with that time, right? And that is all that I can think about listening to everything that's been said tonight. And you should, this is my advice, is you give your time to the things you actually value most, right? And you don't waste time. That is all I can say about it. Because time is the only thing you can't buy in life, right?
It's none of us
can.
Glory Jones.
Shit. This was a roller coaster of a stream. Yeah. Thanks again so much, X, for talking about Operation Israel and Anonymous Palestine and Mount Ferguson and all that. It was like that stuff. Yeah, loved reading your books too. And yeah, I'll see y'all on the ground.
X? Or wait, Sleepy Josh, you got anything?
Just want to tell you we love you, X. And I'm glad you're still fighting the fight with us.
Your turn, my friend. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's my show. I have to close out.
I have no closing thoughts. I appreciate being able to come on and speak one last time to people. I think I would echo what Mark said. Time is precious. I think I said it before. Just live your life with no regrets. Aaron Schwartz, I think, said it best. If you're not working on what you think is the most important thing in the world right now, well, then why aren't you? So I think that I would also just add that you can make a difference. I mean, when all of this whole Commander X shit started, I was a nobody living on a mountain ridge in Santa Cruz growing pot. And I was absolutely the most uninfluential person in the entire fucking world. And all I did, the only thing that I did differently than anyone else is the opportunity presented itself to make a difference. And I decided not to look away from that and to embrace it with all my heart and soul. And what I found out from that is that anybody can make a difference. Any individual, no matter how humble, can make a huge difference, a world-shaking difference. And it's just a matter of believing that about yourself. The world is worth saving, but it's going to take everybody stepping up with everything they've got to save it, because otherwise it's definitely 100% going down the drain. And then we're going back to caveman days, and we're going to be fighting these fights with pointy sticks. So, but we can do it. We can save the world. There's no doubt in my mind we can do it. But everybody's going to have to step up. And this is not a bad way to live your life, guys. It's not a bad thing to dedicate your life to. There may be times when you don't have groceries on the shelf, and there may be times when things are rough if you embrace a lifestyle of fighting for freedom. But I can tell you that it is the most gratifying thing I have ever done in my life. And the gratification will flow through you to the very end of your life. So I would encourage everybody during these hard times to be vigilant, to be vocal, and to be as active as you possibly can. It's at times like this when everything is in flux. I love that saying on the show Expanse. I've been watching a lot of TV lately, and that one guy talks about Amos. He talks about the churn, and he talks about how it's only during the churn that you can change things fundamentally and systemically. And I think there's some wisdom in that. You know, we're in the churn right now, and it looks horrible, and everybody's terrified, and I'm as scared as all of you are. Believe me, of how this is all going to pan out. But it's also during the churn when you can make the biggest difference in the world. So get out there, be vigilant, be vocal, be safe. Know that I am always with you. For those who are dear friends and deep supporters who have buoyed me up all these years, and you're still there on the Twitter account supporting Natalie, know that I am with you. I can't be with you in the spotlight the way I used to be, but I'm still with you. I am watching. I am there. I'm rooting for you. Every single fucking day, I am rooting for you guys and your efforts, all of you. So be strong and be vigilant, be vocal, be active. Don't be afraid to try things, no matter how outrageous they might be. And just thank everybody for the incredible support and friendship that I've received all these years. Thank you.
Thank you, X, and thank you, Mark Lubers and Glory, Sleepy Josh, Pasta.
Oh yeah, real quick. Thank you guys for your great questions. Glory especially. Glory, big hug, girl. Keep up the faith, man. You're gonna get it, man. You're gonna get it. But thank you to everybody who helped so hard in this show. Your questions were amazing, in depth. I really enjoyed answering them. Thank you very much.
That's gonna do it for this. We'll be back. I actually haven't set a time for this yet. Do you want to do 3 or 4?
4.
Okay, so we'll be back at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern with Jason Burmis and hopefully Tedros Fikramariam for another round of unpacking exactly what happened in DC last Wednesday at the Capitol. All of Jason, Teddy, and myself were present for this. So we have eyewitness accounts at different vantage points throughout the day, which I really, again, I can't stress enough, man. If you're, and I know we have a lot of content creators in the chat right now. I know we've got some journalists in the chat right now. If you're not talking to people who are on the ground for this, you've got an incomplete picture. And I can't stress enough the importance of talking to people who experience this in person in order to help give your respective audiences a more complete picture. X, I love you, brother. I do. I got a lot of love for you, man. And I'm very grateful for the friendship that we've developed, short as it's been. And if I have to smuggle myself into Mexico, I'm going to get down there to see you before too long.
Better be dragging my ass with you.
I'm going to make a Sleepy Josh backpack.
I'll be right with you guys.
Stuff Josh in a frame pack. Yeah. Fucking. And we'll, if I have to, I'll fucking, cross the border with a couple of dogs in camouflage pants with an American flag sticking up behind me. Like I saw in a picture once.
Hey, that's how I get in. I went right down the middle of the country wearing a MAGA hat. Literally, I came out of Manitoba and went right through Idaho, all of those Trump states, right down the middle. And I wore a MAGA hat the whole time, and they never even looked at me sideways. Just camouflage yourself, man.
But we'll see you back here in a few hours for everybody in the chat. And to everybody who's in the chat right now, man, thank you so much. You guys fucking rock. We love you. For the people who've thrown super chats and tips on the Rockfin, you guys are fucking great. Thank you. Please go make your free Rockfin account. And if you are so inclined and you would like to view all of the premium content on Rockfin, endorse Slow News Day. It's $9.99 a month. You get everybody else's premium content. Rockfin was created with content creators in mind. They don't censor us. They encourage us to cover controversial subjects. Working on an Android app, and the chat seems to be running much better. So Rockfin, please go do that fucking thing. And we'll be back here soon. Good luck to
Hey, Steve, don't we have a website?
SlowNewsDayShow.com.
Good luck to us all.